each weekday, and you can see that schedule by clicking on the title of the room. And nearly everybody on stage, with the exception of Lolly, joins us every day. Welcome back, Cam, and you got Manaz and anyone else, Nicholas, any regulars in the audience that want to jump up, please do. We're about to jump into some headlines, and boy, there's a couple of juicy ones. I got a super crazy juicy one that I just dropped in Justin's room about 30 minutes ago.
I was there.
That was Danish and Cheryl were there. That's why they're laughing.
Oh, God. Yeah.
This is a doozy. This is a doozy. I can't believe this one. We're gonna hold that one though for 30 minutes until 10:30 because the room will double in size between now and then. And Hassan on Twitter correctly guessed the artist for today as The Clash. And how that works is we have this Twitter account, which is the second screen experience to this room that we're in Clubhouse. And what do I mean by the second screen experience and the Twitter account? It's TNATW, Tech News Around the World. TNATW is the Twitter account, and that's where folks in this room are sharing headlines for us to consider to share and discuss. And if somebody shares a good one, I retweet it from the Tech News Around the World Twitter account. And I have to say, we're now up to 1,363 followers. We're adding 100 a day on average. So it's rocketing, and that means within 30 days, we'll have 3,000 more followers. Because, it was about 2 weeks ago that we started this. That's exactly right. So, and that's great because tomorrow we're going to do something special on the Twitter account, which is we're going to do this room in Twitter Spaces, the Twitter's version of Clubhouse. And that will be very interesting. If you've not tried that, you're welcome to try it with us. Yeah. But the other reasons to follow it, of course, is because when we read the articles in this room, we share them on Twitter at the same time. So you can click on the articles and read them in real time or later on. And if you find an article you want to share, tweet it from your own Twitter account and include our Twitter account, TNATW, and then we'll see it. And if we like it, you retweet it to our ever-growing list of followers. And I have to say, it's a fantastic Twitter news channel to follow. I mean, the articles that we share from there are fantastic. So let's jump into it. So, like I said, I'm going to drop a bomb now in 27 minutes of a fantastic article that I shared in Justin's room. And let's start things off, though, with some minor bombs. We've got Apple saying that it has a new podcasting app coming out. And they have subscriptions as part of this new podcasting app, paid subscriptions, so that podcasters today on Apple cannot make money from their podcasts on Apple, the same way that app makers on Apple can make money from their apps by charging money for their apps. Well, why shouldn't podcasters be able to make money from their podcasters? And honestly, Apple probably was not planning to change that until Spotify announced recently that Spotify is going to let podcasters charge money, and Twitter's going to let Twitter creators charge money, and Facebook now has announced they're going to let their creators charge money, and so Apple naturally is now going to let their podcasters charge for their podcasts on Apple Podcasts. So in an email to podcasters, Apple says it is delaying the launch of its new podcast subscriptions and channels until June, and plans improvements to its podcasting app. Apple has announced in an email today that it is delaying the launch of its Apple Podcast subscriptions because they've got a whole bunch of extra new features they want to add into it, although it's not exactly sure what those additional new features are going to be. I imagine it's analytics, because Spotify is starting to give incredibly cool analytics as part of their podcasting. And so I think Apple, just to stay competitive, needs to do the same. And that takes a little more time to code all of that stuff. So I imagine that's the delay. Let me tweet that out to the Tech News Twitter account, as I promised I would do. Sorry, everybody. So if you go to TNATW, you will see that I now just tweeted that out. The next article I want to share, and this is one we've been following every day for about a week now. Give me 2 seconds before I tweet this bad boy out. Not to keep you in suspense, but this is a good one. like I said, we've been following this for a week, and this is about WhatsApp in India. And if does someone on stage want to give us a quick update on how that has been going thus far? Right, it started out as WhatsApp was going to change their privacy policy in India, and then India said, if you do that, you have to leave India. And WhatsApp said, that's not fair. We don't want to change the policy. We need to change the policy because we have plans to add in a financial layer into WhatsApp so that Indians can use WhatsApp to pay for things. And that's a billion, if not $1 trillion opportunity. So we really, really, really don't want to change. We do need to change the privacy policy so that we can add in this new payment layer because that's a lot of money, India. And India says, no, you can't do it. You have to keep the same privacy policy, and you can't force people to accept your new privacy policy. If you do that, you got to leave India. And that's been the standoff for the past week. And then here's the headline, what I'm now tweeting out. You can see it for yourself. WhatsApp now reverses course and won't limit the functionality if you don't accept its new privacy policy. So India officially won in their standoff against WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is now backing down from their position of forcing everyone to accept this new privacy policy. And what WhatsApp was very clever. What they said was, if you don't accept the new privacy policy, we're going to start removing functionality of the app. Like you won't be able to make calls, you won't be able to send messages. Essentially, the app will die on your phone. And now they're saying they're not going to do that no more. And so you don't have to accept the new privacy policy, which means they might not be able to, in the near term, do what they really want to do, which is make WhatsApp a payment app, just like WeChat is in China. And interesting development.
KTM. There's
Yeah,
Indian players.
Yeah,
Right?
there's the. I mean, that is
That's
such a. It is such a tremendous opportunity, and if to get your head around how big of an opportunity it is, I encourage you to do a Google search for population density map, and you will quickly be astounded by the fact that basically half the planet lives in India. And you'll notice that America looks completely, utterly empty compared to India on a population density map. China doesn't look empty. India looks jam-packed, top to bottom, left to right. It's just jam-packed full of people. It is way, 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 way more people than America. And that's why it's such a huge, juicy opportunity for apps like WhatsApp who want to become the way that people pay for things. And that's all coming on board. That's just a tremendous, huge battle going on at the moment. So that's why we'll see how that continues. Another new headline, and then I'm going to turn it to the stage to see who's got something to share. And if you got something to share, just raise your hand and we'll get you up on stage. So there's Microsoft is saying that the hackers behind the big SolarWinds craziness, where these Russian hackers broke into the U.S. State Department, into all over, up into the government. And so now Microsoft's saying that the hackers behind the SolarWinds recently breached the State Department's aid agency called USAID, which is the U.S. agency that provides support to countries that need aid in times of trouble. And so the SolarWinds hackers are back at it again. But this is according to Microsoft, who's obviously a third party. They're totally separate from the U.S. government. And they've confirmed that the Russian hackers are back at it again, hacking into the USAID, and they are sending emails with malicious code to 150 organizations, including NGOs, that are critical of their boss, Vladimir Putin. What a surprise. Another day and another kind of Russian cyber hacking craziness. If you follow us every day, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And as usual, we now have twice as many people in the room, as I said before. So how about we just jump in early into this crazy bomb of a headline that we got, keeping it on the political front, shall we? Here it is. So I gotta find it so that I can tweet it. You mind bearing with me, because you're not going to believe this unless I give you a link to watch it for yourself. So hold on, I gotta find this. Can somebody stall for me?
Hey, Daniel, man, your mic. You
Yeah, I
good?
got it. I got his mic. But if somebody can come up with
Sorry.
give me 1
No,
minute to
no
stall
worries.
while I find this video, because you're not going to believe this. Hold on, Stephen Colbert, Amazon, MGM, and okay, here it is. I found it. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to tweet this out now. And you guys remember we talked last week about one of the big headlines from last week was that Amazon was planning to buy MGM Studios. That was the rumor, right? Remember that? And hold on one second. I need to get this out so everyone sees this. Bezos to stop Trump re-election.
Hey guys, how's Saturday going?
Here we go. I got this.
Start.
You guys,
Oh, we good.
re-election. Okay, so here it is. So Amazon buying MGM Studios. It's now confirmed. It's happening. $9 billion. Right? Right. That news just broke 24 hours
Yep.
ago.
Good.
The
Good
question,
basic news.
right? Yeah. Well, and we talked at length about why they're doing that and how the big platforms like Amazon Prime has all of their members, and they are competing with Netflix, and they need to create lots of content, and they are the new power player in Hollywood because they've got all the money from all the subscribers to create all the new content. Yeah, they're taking over the studios, and they're physically buying the studios like MGM. But there's something that we completely missed out of this. Are you ready for this? This gets crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out Jeff Bezos and Donald Trump really don't like each other. And let me just unpack how much they don't like each other. Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, Trump always felt that, the Washington Post was very unfair to him. And so Trump has the Secret Service and the CIA and the FBI, and they were able to get some information about Mr. Bezos cheating on his wife, and they leaked it. And who did that information get leaked to? None other than Trump's friend who runs the National Enquirer, right? Pinker. So the National Enquirer leaks the information that the actual phone records and text messages between Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, and his mistress. And the National Enquirer runs it. And just turns out that the boss of the National Enquirer happens to be one of Trump's longest standing friends. What an interesting coincidence. Now watch this. Amazon buys MGM. Amazon's boss, Jeff Bezos. MGM happens to be the studio behind The Apprentice, which was Donald Trump's TV show. The executive producer was Mark Burnett. It is well known in Hollywood that there are outtakes of The Apprentice, and there's lots of footage that was left on the cutting room floors that was clearly never put in any episode of Donald Trump using the N-word repeatedly in reference to people on the show. And now
Good luck to him.
that belongs to Jeff Bezos.
What was the price again he paid for that? $9 billion?
$9 billion. And here's what's
small money. Small money.
Now, here's what's amazing about this. The accountants in this deal on Amazon's side did the calculations. Anytime there's an acquisition like this, the accountants and lawyers get involved and they do a fair assessment value. The merger and acquisition team, it's called the M&A team, figure out what the company's worth. And they calculated it at $5 billion. So why are they paying $9 million? Because there's other information that made it a much more attractive offer, because that footage potentially will completely sink Trump's re-election plans.
Well done.
There it is, folks.
Any money for it.
And now it gets better.
If the grand jury doesn't do it first, but
true,
yes, Tyler.
Yes, but the link that I just tweeted out is from Stephen Colbert, who on his show just recently has Tom Arnold as an eyewitness, because Tom Arnold was on The Apprentice, and he claims he was on the show when Trump was using the N-word, and he says that he's seen the tapes. He's an eyewitness, ear witness to the tapes exist. And he said,
of course, they'll explain it as a deep fake, but yes.
Oh, they're just, here it is. I mean, but Tom Arnold himself personally is saying, I saw the tapes and I saw him saying this. And so he says, here it is right here. So the link I just tweeted out from the Tech News Twitter account, you can check it out for yourself. It's from Variety.com. And Variety is like the big publication in Hollywood. It says, Stephen Colbert says Amazon should release Trump's Apprentice outtakes after buying MGM. Holy mother of DVD extras. The private footage of TV billionaire is going to belong to an actual billionaire, which is Jeff Bezos. Someday soon, Bezos may release the most racist thing in the MGM catalog other than Gone with the Wind, Colbert joked. And a Celebrity Apprentice contestant Tom Arnold said he saw a compilation of outtakes in which Trump says the N-word and C-word and called his son Eric Trump the R-word. He says every bad thing ever.
What's the R word?
Yeah, I would say it, but it's quite upsetting to some people in America, actually. He says every bad thing ever, every dirty, every offensive, racist thing ever, Arnold said while on the show. While these tapes have never been made public, Bezos' long-running feud with the former president leads Colbert to suggest that the Amazon founder may release the infamous outtakes. And by the way, I happen to have very close friends I lived in Hollywood for many years, as some of the people in this room know. And some of my friends are executive producers of some of the biggest shows not only in America, but in the world. And which, if you keep watching this show every day, you'll get a sense for who those people are, actually, which shows I'm talking about. Wipeout. Fear Factor. So, anyway, my friends.
I have the question, will anyone care? Yeah. I mean, whatever Trump did, nobody cared. Like, whatever he said.
I'm guessing whoever says that is not American. Katerina. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Katerina.
Katerina.
Katerina. Let me make clear to you. In America, if you use the N-word about somebody, it's an incredibly big deal. You will not be. You will not.
Why do you think these didn't come out earlier? Given everything else that came out?
People, they will make up a story and say this is all liberal plotting and false, fake stuff, and they don't care about facts. We care about reality. They don't care about reality. They have their own world, and that's the problem. It's not facts. I don't think facts are the problem.
Tyler, I have another angle to this.
Well, let me put it this way. When Trump was running for the Republican candidacy, the GOP apparently was very apprehensive about approving him precisely because Hollywood knows these tapes exist, and they were very worried about the tapes coming out. And now if the tapes come out, it's going to be very.
Well,
tricky.
we had the grab by the P tape. You know what?
Yeah, that compared to using the N-word about a person is incredibly nothing. Relatively,
you can't
zero.
You can't call the N-word locker room talk.
Correct.
And by the way, everyone forgets that when he came out with the P word, he was running against Hillary Clinton, who defended her husband. So in that sense, it kind of canceled out, whereas the N-word is a very different ballgame.
In America, it's in a completely different category. Completely different category.
Well, especially if you look at his recent numbers, right? Like he had a significant being a strong word, but a significantly higher proportion of the black male vote as compared to Romney or any of the predecessors in the GOP. And so that definitely hurts his ability to get the...
Yes, he actually got a record number increase in both women, Hispanics, and black voters, and he actually only lost votes with white males in this last election.
This is a great
So when you look at the numbers, it's very different. And then the second thing is using the N-word. Joe Biden used it multiple times also in the Senate when he was a senator. and many
Well,
other
I'd
times.
like that. I'd like a fact check on that. But okay,
Yeah, you could look it up. There's videos of it.
again, I'd like to get that fact.
Yeah, we can politifact it, Snopes it.
By the way, PolitiFact had to retract one of their corrections on the lab leak theory, and
Yes,
they had to redo everything. And it gets funnier. They had Dr. Fauci on their PolitiFact conference about 2 weeks ago, and now they're all backtracking it. In fact, Vox, Paul Graham did a great post on it, where they actually went and redacted their previous articles, and they claim to be the voice of science.
This is a very good point, which is there was a headline, and by the way, today being Saturday, and it was this. We don't schedule Tech News Around the World on Saturdays because we intentionally don't schedule, even though we know we will probably do it, because we like to lower the expectations and give ourselves a little more flexibility and freedom to try new things. And one of the things I'd like to try is recapping some of the highlights of the past week. And certainly one of the highlights of the past week was precisely that issue you're raising, Sal, which is that Facebook itself is previously was blocking people from sharing posts about the lab leak theory from the Wuhan lab. And they now have a new policy that they will no longer be blocking those posts because as Fauci himself says, and as Biden himself says, there needs to be a new investigation into the lab leak theories, and it's a whole new day on that front as well.
Have you done a show on the lab leak theory, Tyler?
We covered it when the news broke that Facebook was, doing kind of a 180 on their policy of no longer banning it, and we talked about why they're not, and we talk often about why Facebook and Twitter and the social networks, not only why, but precisely how they go about this mix of algorithmic and human curation, moderation.
And the issue is that science is actually an inexact science. So anyone that knows the scientific method is your conjecture and your hypothesis is valid till you disprove it. And that's the whole idea of a constant. So if you look at like medical studies and then you track them over 10, 15 years, most of them end up to be wrong. And so there's a lot of statistical methods. So like Corona being very recent, there's no exact yes or no to many things. And I'm not even an anti-vaxxer. I'm a pro-vaxxer. I've had every vaccination known to mankind. But that doesn't mean we should shut down discourse and dialogue.
How many of the COVID vaccines have you had? You do all of them?
I know I haven't done all the COVID vaccines. My point is I've been vaccinated against everything, including MMR, tetanus, you name it.
Yeah.
But I think that is the cause of the problem. Like, most people don't really understand the process, and they like certainty. And because there's a back and forth in science, and then also, yes, let's say with where the COVID virus came from, most people don't like that. They want certainty. So they will just say that this is all fake, and they lied to us, because they really don't want to get the process of the scientific method. So they just say, you see, they covered it up, they lied about it, they told us false things, and then you get this mistrust.
But they did lie and cover it up. That's the issue.
Yeah, in this case you did, and you have other cases in medical practices where people did. The opioid crisis, and then you wonder why people don't trust doctors to take the vaccine. I mean,
well, look at the historical sugar study.
I think that the data shows
we're conflating
people trust their
doctors.
Things. They don't trust politicians and
exactly.
Others,
and I was going to say we've got to stop using. Again, I'm a little biased.
People don't trust the doctors here in the U.S. It's very different.
People don't trust their doctors. I would argue.
I'm going to push back on that.
That's really not. Americans trust doctors. They don't trust politicians.
Exactly.
Yeah. By the way, guys, go back in history in the 70s.
In the COVID vaccine, like they get microchipped and stuff like that.
So they don't trust the messaging.
That's why Melinda Gates divorced Bill Gates.
Their personal physicians.
But if you go back in history, in the 70s, Harvard Medical School came out with a study saying that fat is bad for you, and it was funded by the sugar lobby. And that actually changed old dietary patterns in the 80s and 90s. People ran away from
Exactly.
fat.
It's amazing.
And it was paid for, it was a pay-to-play scheme. And so when people distrust, there's an ounce of truth to it.
Well,
But
they
I mean,
distrust
doctors were part of it.
organizations
You
like the
cannot
American
tell
Medical
me if you had
Association.
basic pharmacology that you didn't know what opioid does to your body and how addictive it is. I mean, this is known for I don't know how many decades. This is really
But
also a
Katerina,
problem
I don't
of
want to
integrity of
Katerina, I don't
doctors
want to
that
talk
are
over you, but
bought
I want
by
to,
pharma.
Yeah,
Katerina, I don't
go
want to
ahead,
over
Matt.
speak over you, but Danish is speaking to this as well. You really have to disassociate doctors. Like I am a single medical doctor with a panel of patients that I see, and most of them trust me, with the messaging from organizations, that do represent some doctors, that do represent governments, but those are two very, very different things. I think a lot of
Well
Americans
said, Matt.
in particular
So you
do not trust
didn't prescribe
organizations.
opioids? I mean, I had three
Carl, please check your
C-section in my
DM.
life.
Well,
I
that's
had
Okay,
two
Cecilia
in
well,
Portugal, one
Katerina,
in
commenting.
Germany, and one
that's
in
not
the
this
gonna
US.
that's not
In
gonna
the
head
productive at
US,
to
all.
a
I got
good
prescribed
discourse.
for 90 days
Carl, please
opioid
check your
for a
DM.
simple
Ka-
C-section. So this is also the
And
Listen,
there are
Katerina,
bad
that's not going to end
anecdotes
up
of
in a good
bad
discussion.
doctors.
It's not going in a good place. I don't normally do that, but just it's kind of almost like a direct attack to three or four people here without a
No, it's not.
reasonable.
It's. I'm also a scientist, so I in mental health issues, and this is a problem, and this is an obvious problem, and I don't understand why there's a problem to address this.
Richard,
Katerina,
And
it's
there's
I
not the
know a
also,
lot
forum,
of
though,
people
right?
that
It's
want
not
to
the
take
forum.
the flu shot or anything and won't take any advice from doctors.
Katrina, we
You
could always
know,
do
I
Katerina,
this in
know.
another forum, too. We could always have another room. You could start a room, and we could join you later on if you want to discuss this in detail. But I
Yeah,
think
shall
this
we
is not the
move
forum,
on
right?
to
You
the
said
next
we...
No,
topic?
no, it's important because
It is.
you have three doctors from America telling somebody from Spain about America, American
Oh,
medical
well,
system.
Well, well,
but by the
No,
way,
Tyler,
no,
I
I'm
hold
just
an
want
on.
assistant
to, yo,
professor
yo,
at
yo, yo, yo.
NYU,
We're
and
we're
I'm
doing a lot of different.
in New
So
York
can
for
somebody
a
mute
long
Katarina
time
for a
now.
second?
I am not
We're doing
somebody
a
from
lot of
Portugal
different.
who doesn't know how. I'm at
Yeah,
NYU
Katarina,
Langone,
you're just
assistant
spreading.
professor.
Can
So
somebody mute her? Or
It's
okay. So what Katarina's doing is she's coming in, and she's not only obviously being offensive to the doctors on the stage, but
No, hold
she
on.
is either outright lying or spreading misinformation without
But
any
Justin,
facts. So
let's not put words in her mouth. I think
I'm
we
sorry.
hold
should
on.
have a forum.
Opioids.
Let me
The
just explain.
companies
Heyman,
were
hang on
sued
once.
So
for the
here are the
opioid
facts, right?
problem. This is not
Okay.
Okay.
misinformation.
She's just
They
gonna
were
not let
sued. They had to
any.
pay a lot of money
So
because of the
can somebody
misinformation.
like mute her or something? Okay. So she's making a claim that Americans do not trust doctors, and she's not bringing in any facts to this argument. And this is purely misinformation. If you go Google Americans trust in doctors, I have a poll from the start of the pandemic that say 74% of
And
US
nurses.
Americans view doctors mostly positive. So that's all
And
that I wanted to
nurses.
add in here is some facts. You can go get a bunch of different polls. This is from Pew Research, generally suggested around the world as one of the most reputable polling institutes in the world. And I would argue, from all of the polling information we've seen, from all of the news stories, whether Fox News, Breitbart, CNN, MSNBC, a cross section of political media. So you see that there's no agenda here. Doctors are actually considered the most trusted institution by Americans. So I just wanted to really
So
bring
why
those
do you
facts
have
to
Thank
light.
so
you,
low
Justin.
vaccination rates in some states? Because the doctors are telling people to get vaccinated.
by the
Can I
way,
add
that's
something?
a different
I mean,
You're
rabbit hole. But
we're,
just to
you're
go
not
back
you're
in
not.
By
history,
the
Justin is
can I
right.
say
You're not.
something? I mean, disregard of the COVID, COVID virus origin. We need to remember the only weapon that we have to fight this monster is the vaccine, is the science. And the only successful weapon that has helped us to look forward and see light at the end of the tunnel and starting to reopen and get to the normal life is the vaccine. We can't say the people don't trust science or doctors is just because there are some wrong messages and controversial messages on social media. This is a professional stage, and we are coming here as professional. Let's just talk in fact and bring the fact on the table, not mainstream propaganda. Thank you.
By the
No,
way,
I
there's always a
totally
concept
agree.
of
And I think
second
there's
opinion
Hang on,
when
I'm
it
going to
comes.
ask.
states
Hang
that
on, one
people
guys.
don't
Sal,
get
1 second.
vaccinated, and
Katrina,
their
I'm gonna
doctors
ask you
are
something.
telling them to get
Katrina, I'm going to
vaccinated.
ask you to do something. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do this on behalf of Tyler if he doesn't want to do this. Katrina, I'm going to ask you to take this discussion in a separate room after this room, and we're going to move on from here.
It's a great
And
it's
if
a
you,
great deep dive conversation.
yeah, it's great, and I think you should that, and it's going to be a fun discussion, and you guys can get into it and really bring the facts and work that through. To Justin's point, this is we've got to bring the facts, we've got to bring the research, and please, can I ask you to do that? If you don't want to do that, it's not something we do on this stage to kind of you know mute somebody. It's just not what we do. But
And can I
because
add
people kind
something?
of understand. Hang on 1 second, Sal. Because people understand that this is for the overall, good of the show and the good of the audience and the good of what everyone's doing. So, can I ask you to do that? Just kind of
We'll
subjugate a
do it.
little
We'll
bit
do a
on this.
follow up room all
Well,
about
yeah,
why are Americans not getting, why are people, or it's not even an American issue. It is, but it is interesting to ask why are many Americans not getting vaccinated, and get into the science of why it is. I'm not even going to
sure.
say why it is. So we'll save it for the room because then that's the only way to end, kind of move on. But I'm interested in that
Tyler, sorry,
conversation. Yeah,
just one thing to add.
yeah,
This is a global issue.
yeah, exactly.
Anti-vaccine is a global
That's what I
issue.
said. You're right. It is. It is. It is.
Okay, so
By
let's
Guys,
the
Said
if I
way,
could say
82
one
point
point.
something
take
percent.
that as we're moving on. We
Yeah.
take that
but
as we're moving
I was
on.
just going to
Let's move
say
on.
one thing is doctors are humans. They can make mistakes. That's why there's a concept of
Sal, we're
getting a
moving on.
second
It's
opinion.
okay.
Okay.
Yep. Here we go.
We've
So,
got it.
who was it that just sent in this fantastic article? Rutvies just sent in an article that I just retweeted to the Twitter account, which you can see at TNATW. Here it is. The Facebook, and this is coming from TechCrunch. Facebook, WhatsApp, Google, and other internet giants comply with India's IT rules. And I know we talk about this quite a bit. I need to add a timestamp. There we go. And so Google, Facebook, Telegram, LinkedIn, and Tiger Global-backed Indian startups ShareChat and Coup have either fully or partially complied with the South Asian nation's new IT rules, according to two people familiar with the matter and a government note obtained by TechCrunch. India's new IT rules, unveiled in February this year, require firms to appoint and share contact details of representatives tasked with compliance, nodal point of reference, and grievance redressals to address on-ground concerns. The aforementioned firms have complied with this requirement. The government note and a person familiar with the matter said the firms were required to comply with the new IT rules by this week. There was a cutoff. Twitter has yet to comply with the rules. Twitter sent a communication late last night sharing details of a lawyer working in a law firm in India as their nodal contact person and grievance officer. A note prepared by New Delhi said, adding that the rules require the aforementioned officials to be direct employees. So Twitter's trying to skirt the rules by having a non-direct employee as the person they talk with, and the government understandably wants an actual employee, not a third-party lawyer or hired representative. And why do we think this is? Is this so that the government, when they have tweets and content they don't like on the social networks, they have a very direct way of removing content they find objectionable, is it not?
Tyler, so they already
Could I?
comply with U.S. law, with FISA rules, with national security letters. India is basically just trying to have the same type of rules in their own jurisdiction. Balaji actually tweeted quite a bit about this as well. And none of this is new. In fact, some of them release canaries when the U.S. government goes after them with FISA and national security letters. So basically, India is trying to have the same types of rules in their own jurisdiction as already exists for them in the United States. Microsoft actually went to court against the U.S. government when they were trying to get data from their Irish data center, and they lost, even though it was not hosted in the U.S., it was hosted in Ireland. So this is a global phenomenon, and there's going to be probably a lot of decentralization coming down the road, but it's worth talking about.
Well, it's an interesting point because, of course, America has this with American companies. Do they have it with all international companies that do business in America?
Well, they went after Binance using part of the FACTA treasury rules. So that was also interesting when it came to extraterritoriality. So,
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
Just one check. It's interesting that all these companies agreed with India, because I think the potential is only because they consider this market, because there are a lot of countries who have tried doing this. Like, for example, Pakistan country tried doing the same thing as India last year, but all these giants like formed a group together and said they would boycott the entire country, and then they don't want to comply to it. And Pakistan ultimately agreed that it would not be doing the IT rules against these people, because again these companies were just wanting to leave Pakistan. But that is not true for India, because I believe this is only working with India is because of the size of market that these tech companies see the future for.
exactly. So the market size is the big determinant over there. If they can walk away from the market, then they don't care. If they can't, then they're like, we'll comply.
Okay. Anyone got a headline? I got a few more to jump into here, but I paused to see if someone's got something.
There's a 5G headline from the Wall Street Journal where the 5G game is apparently changing, and the whole thesis is that the Trump administration going after Huawei has been disrupting the 5G market, and there's new entrants like Samsung, etc. But my theory is actually it's just correlation. 5G, the technology is changing, and it's all IP now. So there's a whole bunch of new opportunities for new entrants anyway.
Okay, 5G. And then I've got one here about the SEC files a lawsuit against alleged promoters of crypto Ponzi scheme BitConnect. Amay, you shared this one. Is Amay on the stage? Not right now. Maybe when she gets back. So the Securities Exchange Commission, otherwise known as the SEC, has filed civil lawsuit against 5 people accused of promoting BitConnect, a now defunct crypto Ponzi scheme. The regulator contends the platform's lending program constituted a $2 billion unregistered securities offering since the firm wasn't a registered broker-dealer. BitConnect first debuted in 2016. The FBI publicly sought out potential BitConnect victims in 2019. Now the SEC is holding down the 5 people, and they named them here: Trevor Brown, Craig Grant, Ryan, and Michael Noble, to account for their alleged advertisement on the merits of the platform. So the SEC compliant charges the promoter defendants with violating the registration provisions of the federal securities law. Yes, go ahead. Somebody jumped in there.
No, I think Dan just jumped on.
Oh, okay. Venmo now lets users control the visibility of their friends lists, and Venmo will let you make your friends list private. After we found, the headline is after we found Biden's account on Venmo, and then by finding his account, they're able to find all of his contacts. Venmo confirmed it is adding a feature that would let people set their friends list to private, after some journalists found Joe Biden's Venmo account and all of his friends. Venmo, the mobile payments app owned by PayPal, is changing its privacy settings after a BuzzFeed news story uncovered President Joe Biden's account earlier this month. The move allows people to make their friends list private. A spokesperson for Venmo confirmed that the hide friends feature has been added and told BuzzFeed News, "We are enhancing our in-app controls, providing customers an option to select public, friends only, or private settings for their friends list." On Friday, my personal friend, Jane Wong in Hong Kong, a software engineer who regularly exposes features being tested by companies like Facebook and Twitter before they are released, found that Venmo was building a way to allow people to make friends lists private. So kudos to my friend Jane, who, by the way, was the very first mod of the very first episode of Tech News Around the World with me and Cal and Jason Calacanis. Just a little Tech News Around the World trivia for you.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
I had one that I wanted to follow up on a news story from earlier in the week.
Go for it.
And so it was about the optogenetics and the allowing people to be, they've been trying optogenetics with helping the blind see. And that was the good part of optogenetics. Now I'm going to give you the bad part. I tweeted it to reply to Tech News Around the World.
Okay.
So scientists are using optogenetic approaches to actually remotely control the social behavior of mice with light. This came out in Science News. It's based out of an article. So what they did was they genetically modified cells in the brain of these mice so that they would respond to light, and then they put optogenetic devices. So they actually they put a little Neuralink like transmitter where they were actually sending light signals in 4 different wavelengths to actually change the behavior, not only of the mice itself, but also how they're responding to other mice. And
Yeah, I do that in the lab all the time. I don't see, so this is a very precise tool to dissect out which neural pathways and which neural cell types are responsible for which behavior and how, so this is a very powerful tool for neuroscience that has been used now since
so,
2006.
Katarina, the thing that was very different about this, thank you for bringing that up. So, based on Philip Guttroff at University of Arizona at Tucson, one of the things that is very different about this is that you don't need significant external specialized hardware. That's a very good point. And so that's been one of the big things, which is this is more an optogenetic approach,
Well, you
at
need
least according to.
LED implants. You need to do brain surgery and implant a light source. So you either need a cable that they are hooked up to, but now we have wireless, but
Yeah, I
you
would just
still need to put an implant in. That's quite major surgery also to the animals.
I mean, I'm assuming there's something different about this, Katarina, because it's in Nature Neuroscience. So I would recommend you read the article and kind of give us more feedback on it. I think the thing that's very interesting about this was not just the approach, but much more importantly, what they were studying, which is that using neural circuitry, they were actually actively studying the impact it was having on social interactions. And I think that's sort of speaking to the bigger point, which is earlier in the week we mentioned how in humans they're doing clinical trials of using algae and optogenetic approaches through that to allow somebody and
Yeah,
associating
I
that with
can
VR.
explain to you what you need. Optogenetics means that you use light to inhibit or activate neurons. And for that, you need to express that receptor that we harvested from algae. Actually, this was done first at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And my professor, George Augustine, was one of the first ones to bring it to the US. We did transgenic mice with it back in 2007, 2006. And so you need, first of all, to either have a transgenic mice, so they have this receptor throughout their life, or you need to inject a virus that will target specific neurons in specific brain regions. Or now this is also, we can also do this in glia, and there was even a paper that did this in heart cells. So you need to first do the surgery to inject in this brain regions this virus that it will express these specific receptors, right, that are sensitive to light, and then they open up and positive or negative ions float into the neuron based on what you want to do. Positive is to excite, negative is to inhibit. And then, because these receptors are only activated with light, you need to add a light source. And as we know, we have they are being developed different types of these receptors that even near-infrared light can activate them, which was not possible before. But we know that even near-infrared doesn't pass the skull. So what you need to do is you need to implant a light source. And without it, it's not possible. We have now different tools. This will be a different thing. It's not optogenetic, it's magnetogenetics. You can do that by using magnets. And this you could do remotely, but you still need to inject this virus that will express those receptors. There's a
That's
new
wonderful. I
tool
think
that's being developed is with bioluminescence. So you make the neurons
So,
themselves create the
Katrina,
light.
Katrina, can I
But
ask
for
you
that,
just
you need an activated
uh,
drug. So you
yeah, just
always need an additional way to
no,
control.
no, that's really helpful. Can I just ask very quickly for the audience, like, so what's your reaction to the article in a quick way? Like, so it needs clearly the more depth of the understanding that you have to interpret it, or just what's your reaction to the headline that Dr. Danish brought in?
So So all these experiments are being done to dissect out what what neurons are responsible for which behavior. This is really involved and has to be really, really detailed. This is not like just some trivial
Got it.
technology that
Yeah.
we
No,
can
that's
just
a very
translate
important
to the
point.
human.
Yeah, it's not trivial, and it's there's a lot of depth to it, which you've very well kind of
Yeah.
delineated.
The,
Thank
the
you.
main point that I was trying to bring out, Cal and Katerina, and I'm really, really grateful that you're here because you can actually tell us sort of the techniques behind it. I mean, I cut into the brain as an ENT, but only to take out an acoustic neuroma. So, I've never really gone into the other parts of the brain, and probably that's a good thing for my patients. But I was going to say that, overall, what's really, really exciting about the entire field is that obviously the research has been around for a long time, but now people are looking at different use cases. What's very concerning is that they're looking at things that clearly will scare the bejesus out of any normal person out off the street, which is how do we impact the social behavior of people using some of these techniques? And I think that's what I was trying to highlight, that there's good that can be done from this technology and other technologies like it. And then there's potentially bad that can be done from it. And I think it's just a learning lesson for all of us. That was the main point. And this is Danish, and I'm done speaking.
Yeah, I think the Neuralink advancements, if you go that route, are then more worrisome for people that worry about this, because for this you don't need to inject any virus and you don't need any gene editing for this technology. And once we know more precisely which brain areas are activated in which pattern, you can in the future do this also with electrodes, and we also have very precise implants uh, with very flexible implants. So I think this will be the next generation type of implants. And I would like to just check out bioluminescence that treated Parkinson in animal models, which is really, really interesting. So I agree. All these technologies, everything we study in neuroscience, I always say this, has a lot of good outcomes, but the more we know about the brain, the more will have tools to manipulate the brain. So it's always trade-off there.
Thanks, Katerina. Katerina shared two interesting articles I want to reshare here. One that I just tweeted out about from Ashley Vance, a well-known tech journalist, and this coming from Ashley in Bloomberg Business Week, where he says the title is Silicon Valley wants dogs to live longer so humans can too. Canine life extension research by the startup called Loyal could lead to breakthroughs for the rest of us. As the tech industry has matured, people in Silicon Valley have become obsessed with developing ways to stop the human aging process. And there's actually quite a bit of truth to that. There's quite a bit of interest in the aging phenomena and investment now going into the study of prolonging age, prolonging healthy lifespans. It started with really long bike rides and intermittent fasting, but some venture capitalists and startup employees have moved on to taking dozens of pills every morning or injecting stem cells into their brain. Well, now he's getting a little, taking a little artistic license with that one, but or infusing their body with the blood of the young and viral. That now he's really stretching it, but there you might have one or two people in all of technology who goes that far. This brand of life extension experimentation remains fringe, probably because it's weird and there's not a ton of evidence any of it works. But Celine Halioya has a plan to take the field mainstream, and it involves her dogs. Her startup called Cellular Longevity is developing treatments that extend the lifespan of dogs while also making them more active in the later years. Should such treatments work in canines, she expects consumers and regulators will be more favorably disposed to similar techniques being used on humans. And it's basically a profile of this researcher with her dog. And she says dogs are unquestionably considered the best model for human aging. Actually, that's not what my friends in the aging space at Harvard, Dr. David Sinclair says, who's considered the leading authority on the planet on this issue. He says ferrets are. But anyways, the main barrier to development of anti-aging drugs and therapies for people is that we live too long. The article is quite interesting and definitely worth read if you are interested in this very quickly booming field of aging, and how many, like David Sinclair, believe it's actually aging is that technically could be considered a disease and that it can be stopped. Anyhow, so that was one from Katerina, and then there was another fantastic one that she shared, and I see people are already retweeting Katerina's tweet about the aging, the dog aging. Space plane startup promises 1 hour rides to anywhere on Earth from a company called Venus Aerospace. And Katerina, if I could make a request that in the future you share the articles directly and not the links to Apple News, which forces people to open Apple News readers, which many people don't have, so that when we retweet these, everyone can read them and not just people with Apple News readers. So it says Venus Aerospace is building a passenger aircraft that can hit 12 times the speed of sound, and traveling in a space plane is a lot like traveling in a regular plane, except for the middle part. After reaching cruising altitude, the pilot hits the rocket boosters and blasts the aircraft to the edge of space at more than 9,000 miles per hour, or 12 times the speed of sound. Venus Aerospace, a startup pursuing hypersonic space plane, is aiming to use this technique to ferry people from LA to Tokyo in about an hour. The company was started by two former Virgin Orbit LLC employees, Sarah Duggleby, a code-writing launch engineer, and her husband Andrew, who managed launch payload and propulsion operations. They became fascinated by hypersonic travel after missing Sassy's grandmother's 95th birthday party because the flights were too long from Japan, where they were living at the time. So they left Virgin last June to build their own space plane with an estimated top speed of 9,000 miles per hour. They now have 15 employees, mostly veterans of the space industry, and has received investment from venture capital firms, including Draper Associates. Every few decades, humans attempt this, according to Andrew Duggleby, in a tacit acknowledgement that the idea's repeated failure. This time it will work, he says. So it's let's hope he's right, because that would be fantastic.
How long is the timeline?
There's none. There isn't one. But you can click the article and
1 hour.
read the whole article there. I just retweeted that out from the Tech News Twitter account. Evan just shared an article about a startup called Virtuix, which raises $19 million for a what they call the Omni One VR treadmill, which we had at the launch festival a few years back, but it's clearly made much improvement by looking at the design of it. So I'm just retweeting that so folks can get a look at it. And you might, if you've got the funds, you might want to consider it, because the VR, I have reason to believe, that we've shared many times here in this room over the past week especially, seems to be on the precipice of going mainstream, particularly because on Wednesday next week, and then the week after that, we have potentially the two biggest VR events in history. Yes, in history, are likely to happen on Wednesday next week and the week after that. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about Facebook's annual flagship mother event called F8, with a live streaming keynote from none other than Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, where they will no doubt highlight Facebook's future in VR. And we are going to have a room here together with Facebook's folks like Michelle, who join us each day. And we're going to watch them talk about the future of VR as one of the big plays for Facebook's future. And then the week after that, so that's going to be on June 2nd, again on Wednesday. And then on June 7th, just 5 days after that, Apple's going to have their big flagship annual event called WWDC on June 7th. And again, we will have a live streaming room here to go along with that, where we all watch together and share our shock and amazement in real time while we watch the live stream. And we will be joined by Apple staff, like our friend Sid, who joins us each day. And Apple is very much expected. In fact, we already, those of us who watch very closely know we've already have the evidence that they are going to reveal their very ambitious AR and potentially VR plans at that event. And because both Facebook and Apple are both literally within 5 days of each other, both doing their big annual tech keynotes, where both are expected and well known that they're going to go deep into the AR VR space. That's why I say the mainstream tipping point of AR VR is literally a week away. And that's why this article that I just sent out to the Tech News Twitter account, thank you to Evan on stage for sharing it. I just retweeted it, and people are already retweeting it again. This company raised $19 million for a VR treadmill. What is a VR treadmill? Well, it's kind of like the treadmill you have at the gym, except it moves in 360 degrees. So you can walk in any direction rather than standing still. And why is that interesting? Because when you're in the VR environment, you want to walk in that virtual world, but yet you want to stay in the same place without bumping into walls. So what you need is a VR 3D treadmill, and that's what this is. And it's assumed that eventually, as VR becomes mainstream and critical, eventually, similar to the way computer adoption happened, where it started out that only very select people had computers, like my uncle. And then eventually everyone got them, and eventually everyone might need a VR treadmill in their home. And if you want to see what a VR treadmill looks like, I just tweeted it out, and it looks, I have to say, they've made a lot of improvements since they first announced it at the launch festival a few years ago, and it looks great. And they just raised 19 million because, as we just said, VR is certainly about to happen in the next few days in a very, very big way. And Dr. Danish, I just found your article from sciencenews.org. Scientists remotely controlled the social behavior of mice with light, which certainly is a very interesting headline. So for those who want to do the deep dive on that article, please do so. I just retweeted that one. Thank you for that one, Dr. Danish. And then Cheryl just shared a very interesting update from Japan, where she's based in Tokyo, that Japan Moles is considering offering part of AstraZeneca vaccine supply to Taiwan. And why would they do that? Well, because Taiwan is now having a very big problem with COVID, sort of for the first time. They've done a masterful job, considering they're literally next door to China, where the virus originated. And Taiwan, up until very recently, has effectively not had COVID, which is quite amazing and remarkable and very respectable, considering how close they are geographically. And now they are starting to have a problem. And in fact, today I saw a headline that I need to find so I can retweet it, that in Thailand today, we discovered a new variation, which is a hybrid of the UK and the Indian variations, which is the most quickly replicating version known yet, and the most easily catchable, or the highest R naught factor if you're a geek, which is very concerning, and that's partly why Asia, even though Thailand and Vietnam and Taiwan statistically, mathematically, have had the best defense to COVID thus far, they all now are actually struggling for the first time because this new variations are incredibly resilient and very easy to catch. So back to Cheryl's headline that Japan is now considering offering AstraZeneca vaccines to Taiwan. It's precisely because Taiwan, and we must say, by the way, that Cal and I received DM messages about 4 days ago from somebody who joins us every day on this stage, who I don't know if they want to reveal themselves, but they sent us DMs predicting this perfectly, actually, that Taiwan was going to be getting lots of mRNA vaccines, and they were going to be trading semiconductors for these. And then it was revealed yesterday, 3 days after the person DM'd us, that in fact that did happen. And so we have some real people on the stage with real insights and real inside information, which is fantastic. And good luck, CNN, catching up to the brain trust of awesome insiders on this stage. So, yeah, Cheryl, I can tell you the reason that Japan is going to send AstraZeneca vaccines to Taiwan, even though the journalist doesn't get themselves know. They just say they don't just say in the article why Japan's sending these AstraZeneca vaccines. I happen to know because somebody in this room told me 3 days ago they were going to do this, and they knew why they're going to do this. It's because um, they have the virus. They know they want the mRNA variation, the type of vaccine, and they are trading. They are willing to exchange semiconductors, which Japan very much needs in exchange. Cheryl also just shared a very interesting article that Tokyo Olympic athletes are required to recognize fatal risks amid COVID. The organizers of this summer Tokyo Olympics plan to require athletes to acknowledge that they may face health risks or death. And Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was headlines today that Tokyo is obviously in a heated debate as to whether or not to cancel the Tokyo Summer Games that they've already delayed, right? Because the summer's over, obviously. But the big question is, apparently it's not even their choice anymore. It's up to the Olympic Commission as to whether or not they cancel, not the Tokyo or Japanese government. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The IOC dude had to say no.
Right.
If he say yes, then we have to go on. I think it's not even up to the Japan government now at this point.
Well, it gets very sticky, of course, right? Because Japanese people are starting to say we should cancel this, and apparently it's about 80% of public in public polling. And then you have Masayoshi-san, one of Japan's wealthiest and most famous individuals.
And I guess the reason why they publish this on mainstream media is because I think the government want to cover their own ass.
I think you're exactly right, Cheryl. Very well said. And that here's what's happened lately is one of Japan's wealthiest and most famous individuals has now come out to say this is insane to continue with the Olympics. We need to cancel this. And he's being very straight about that. And then about 24 hours ago, the Doctors Association came out and said, this is insane. We need to cancel this. Correct, Cheryl? You shared that one yesterday. And now the headline today is that the Olympic Commission has the real power to stop this. And I think Cheryl's right. I think this is the government sending this headline out to let the people know that ultimately it's up to the Olympics whether or not they cancel it. And the government doesn't want to take the blame because in Japanese society, if you do something wrong, you're going to have to go on the news the next morning and do a very big kowtow, a very big bow to the nation, a very big apology, gomenasai, to hazukashi dance to the Japanese people. And this is one of the fun parts of living in Japan is you wake up every morning to some company bowing on the 8 a.m. morning news to the nation for embarrassing the country. And they feel this shame very intensely. And so the government is already aware that they might have to be making that very special bowing gesture on the 8 a.m. morning news. And they want to minimize their own embarrassment, which, by the way, in Japanese, embarrassment is an incredibly big issue.
And also one thing, election is coming up.
So you can imagine how the government is trying now to cover its own ass by saying, actually, it's not up to us. It's up to the Olympic Commission. It's their choice. It's not even our choice. And because whoever is in charge makes the decision. And whoever makes the decision, if you make the wrong decision, yes, you are the person at fault, and it's your embarrassment, and you're the one on the 8 a.m. morning news bowing to the cameras before the whole nation. And so the Olympic Commission might have to be doing a very big bow if things get out of hand with COVID during the Olympics. But clearly the government can't risk making the wrong decision with the elections coming up, just as Cheryl said. So it's a really interesting political situation there in Japan with the Olympics right around the corner.
Tyler?
Yeah.
Tyler, just your thing on the Vietnam detects.
Yes.
It's Vietnam that detects the
That's
hybrid Indian and UK.
Yep.
So Diva kindly sent it as well, and I put it on the Twitter thing.
Yep.
So if you wanted
to. Oh,
to.
thank you. I can retweet that to everybody. That's how we do it here. Tech News Around the World. Thank you, Diva, and I'm retweeting that. Here you go. new COVID variant in Vietnam seems like it might be concerning, and indeed it is. And just look at that graph, holy Jesus, where it shows the COVID cases in Vietnam, where since the beginning they had a very small. Here's how well Vietnam, a country of 120 million people, by the way, and these are cases, not deaths. Cases. In March of 2020, the original first wave, they had about 20 cases, not zero deaths, by the way, 120 million people. And then in August, in the second wave, they had about 100 cases, zero deaths, right? And they may have had one death out of that, actually, which you could understand might have been an old person who had COVID and died. And then in February, they had the third wave, and they had a couple hundred cases, again, potentially zero deaths. And now they're having their fourth wave, and it's going, the line is going straight vertical. And we're having the same similar issues here in Thailand, because Thailand and Vietnam have both done incredibly well stopping COVID until very recently with this incredibly new, very easily spreadable, catchable hybrid that is causing a lot of havoc here in Asia. Thank God Europe and Americans are getting vaccinated. And please take it very seriously, back to the point that we touched on at the beginning, and we certainly need to do a deep dive on. I beg all of my American and European friends to get vaccinated, because what's happening here in Asia, if Asia's been able to keep our deaths down to practically zero until now, and you Europeans and Americans, my God, you guys really fucked it up royally when it wasn't even that bad, and we in Asia were able to control it, and now we can't control it. You better thank fucking God you've got vaccines over there, because ours are just starting to arrive now. And you're a bunch of lucky, privileged bastards to be cutting the queue and getting all those juicy vaccines. And I highly implore you to take them while you have them. And we desperately need them now. And hopefully, they're starting to arrive here in Asia. Taiwan very much needs them, and they're going to get them. And same in Thailand. Ours are scheduled to arrive any day now, and Vietnam as well. And hopefully we'll be able to get this all under control. But let me tell you, if these new variations get back to Europe and America, holy shit, you guys are fucked. Holy shit, you're fucked. That's all I can say.
Tyler, one
Yes.
thing I was going to say is, in related news, I tweeted this earlier as well to you and to tech news around the world. We are struggling so much in terms of this problem that now we have 3 different states putting millions and millions of dollars to pay the unvaccinated to take the vaccine. So Ohio, West Virginia, and California, as of this morning as well, further news on that. They increased the amount that they're paying. So, lotteries for the unvaccinated.
Yeah.
Danish, this is for us. I just have a quick question on that. Around the variations that Tyler's mentioning, right? So you've got a ton of variations at this point, only God knows what. And you've got a ton of variations from different countries combining as well. Now, will you need new vaccinations, or are the boosters that they're talking about going to do? Does anyone have any clue on this?
There's a lot of confusion around this, and exactly for the reasons that somebody earlier, Sal, was I think mentioning about how science works. And so for me to make and for us, thank you for the question, for me to make a blanket statement about it would be kind of ill-advised, because we have to do the science, and despite what people think, we actually want to do the right thing. And so I think that at the end of the day, I'll let John actually talk about this, since he's like a much deeper expert than I am. But what I will say is early indications are that for the variants that are the largest variants, the UK variant and a few others, there were some studies done with Pfizer that showed very, very, very promising response. Then the Indian variant, I think people have done some early work on it. John mentioned that the other night. That seems also very promising. And I think the thing that both John and I are the most excited about for us is that T-cell mediated response is going to potentially be our savior, because we clearly are not able to do that for ourselves. And so I'll let John kind of, if it's okay with everybody, I'd rather have John speak on it since I'm
Sure.
not an
Thanks.
epidemiologist.
Thanks. I didn't see John. Hey, John, how are you?
Hey,
Good to see you.
Faraz, good, and thanks, Dr. Danish. Great setup. Um, so there are a couple things that are really relevant. I'll try and make it as quick as possible. So different vaccines have different coverage of different variants. Different countries are experiencing a different array of variants at this very moment. Last February, I tried to propagate the meme that this is going to be a whack-a-mole pandemic for precisely the reasons that we're seeing it become a whack-a-mole pandemic. And it's not just the variants and the risk of escaping different vaccines. It's also the fact, and I'm just stunned because I've been watching the literature carefully, looking for a breakthrough in thinking and haven't seen it yet, because there are variations in the ACE receptor. What are the possibilities that the reason we're seeing countries who did well in the first, second, and third waves getting crushed now with new variants, that the variant itself has evolved to a point where it's more active against genetically predisposed variations in the ACE receptor, which is where the virus attaches. So, to my search, I have not yet found a good mapping of that variable that seems to be unaccounted for in the analysis of why we're seeing such, heterogeneous impacts of different variants at different times around the globe. Getting back to the question of how well the variants are covered by the existing vaccines, it's been studied in a number of labs, and in Seattle, in the Bloom lab, in Israel, in a variety of labs, and and the natural experiments of what's working and what's not. And what we're seeing is that while there are sevenfold reductions in the neutralizing antibodies, and sometimes greater with some of these variants, after the vaccine, that the levels are so high to begin with that we seem to be okay with the current levels of neutralizing antibodies incurred by, most notably studied, the mRNA vaccines of Pfizer and Moderna. We also, the evidence that I reported a couple days ago came from someone on the ground in India who has not published the data yet, but they vaccinated lots of healthcare workers with the AstraZeneca vaccine and found that they had a dramatically lowered rate of hospitalization and death amongst healthcare workers who were vaccinated compared to those who were not vaccinated. So it looks like AstraZeneca is doing a decent job against the Indian variant. They don't have adequate access to the mRNA vaccines, but it appears from some of the in vitro studies that the mRNA vaccines give very good protection against all known variants, including the Indian variant. But this one in Vietnam that's just recently been announced, I don't think anybody's had the time yet to assess. If they have, I haven't read it. The intersection of existing vaccines versus that particular variant. But so far, the good news is that the vaccines, at least approved by the FDA in the U.S., appear to have pretty good coverage against all the known variants. The Southeast Asian emergence in Vietnam is still an outstanding unknown. But one of the fascinating things about all these variants is and this is true of variants that emerge within a single individual who's immunocompromised, who is infected for months on end. The variants that emerge in that individual tend to look like the variants we're discovering in various countries. And so it looks like the repertoire of this virus for how many mutations it can generate that become more infectious, more virulent, attack different demographics, either younger or of different ethnicities. It appears that it has a limited repertoire. If it breaks out, so in the influenza world, there's what we call shift and drift. So minor drifts allow us to have immunity to a new variant vis-a-vis the old variant, but a shift is like a major shift in what the virus presents to our antibodies are generated by our vaccines or prior infection. We haven't seen a true big shift in COVID the way we have in influenza over decades. The problem is that with hundreds of millions of people still infected around the world, the chances that if such a potential array of mutations exists that could overcome all the existing vaccines. If that potential does exist from a physical chemical standpoint within the range of mutation of this virus, we could see an escape out of the current vaccine. But so far, good news, we haven't identified any such variant yet. This is John. I'm done speaking.
John,
one question. Heyman, I'm just wondering, like, because of the fact that Vietnam and Taiwan are pretty uniform communities, right? Have you noticed any differences in the infection rate in cosmopolitan cities like New York or Toronto or anywhere where there's multi-ethnic groups? So you may be able to see the ACE inhibitor variations.
That's the study I'm looking for. And I haven't seen anybody who's mapped out the array of ACE receptor variants versus the predilection to infection and severe disease amongst different populations. I think it's a critical piece of data, and maybe there's nothing there. I mean, maybe the variants in the ACE2 receptors are not consequential and that they're not sorted by ethnicity or demographics in a way that's consequential. It's an open question, and to me, it's kind of striking that somebody hasn't taken that problem on. I don't run a lab on ACE receptors, or I would have done that study. But it's an outstanding question that I would love to have someone show me the paper that says it is or it is not an issue. But it's certainly an open question.
Thank you, John. Great question, Heyman. And Heyman,
Ask,
1 second,
a
Manas.
question?
What's the question? We may or may not, because I got a great headline to share. What's the question, Manas?
No, just quickly regarding the booster from the vaccine that they're developing. Are they considering all the new variant?
The Moderna booster is targeted at the South African variant, which has the 484 mutation, which appears to be one of the most upgrading of capability. And the Pfizer team is working on a update that is targeted against the Indian variant. So the Moderna update, which would probably be the earliest booster that begins to address these variants, is likely to be out. The study underway, I believe, is going to be closed and reported in June. So that's imminent. The Pfizer one targeted against the Indian variant, my guess is, somebody knows, but I don't. I'm guessing it'll be early fall when the results of that study are available. But I will be looking at the data very carefully as these studies are reported and deciding for myself, having had 2 doses of Moderna, whether I want a booster from Pfizer, a booster from Moderna, both or neither. But the other good news is so far we've seen that for people who have healthy immune systems, these vaccines are holding up over time. We don't know if it's going to last for 1 year, 5 years, 50 years, 100 years. And there are different viruses and vaccines where the durations are that disparate. So we don't know until we know for sure, but there's promising news on both the B cell and the T cell side of the immune system that we may get pretty good persistence of the protective effect absent an escape variant. This is John. I'm done speaking.
Thank you, John. But don't go anywhere, because Heyman just shared a humdinger of an article from South China Morning Post, which is a mainland Chinese paper, which I actually like. And I think, David, you would agree, like South China Morning Post.
It's a Hong Kong paper, to be fair.
to be owned by Alibaba, although the government's trying to force Alibaba to sell it to a mainland owner. That's a whole other topic, but very related to this headline, actually. Here's why. The headline is Beijing blocks Taiwan's deal to get the BioNTech, which is the Pfizer vaccine that they want, the mRNA vaccine. And why is Beijing blocking Taiwan's deal directly with BioNTech in Germany, the creator of the vaccine? Pfizer's sort of the distributor of it. And we had a headline about 2 weeks ago that Fosun in China signed a deal with BioNTech. So again, BioNTech is the creator of the vaccine. They did a deal with Pfizer for America and Europe. They did a deal with Fosun for Asia. And Fosun is Chinese, a massive Chinese company, much like Pfizer is a massive Western company.
Fosun debt financed it, Tyler. Fosun debt financed BioNTech.
Not the whole of Asia, only China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau.
Correct. Now watch this. Now here's the point. Beijing blocks Taiwan's deal directly with BioNTech. Now, here's what's so important. And again, this is from South China Morning Post. Taiwan was close to sealing the deal with the German plant, but because of China's intervention, we still can't sign the contract, Taiwan's president tells. A German firm says it does not comment on potential or ongoing discussions to provide vaccine doses. Watch this story. This is fucked up.
Yeah.
Beijing
How
was...
old's the headline?
Huh?
How old is the headline? Is it today?
No, just within the last 48 hours.
Yeah, 48 hours.
28 hours.
Yeah.
48 hours.
Yes,
okay.
Beijing was instrumental in preventing Taiwan signing a deal to buy the COVID-19 vaccines that they are desperately in need of, though we just talked about it 2 stories ago. From German firm BioNTech, the island's president, Tsai Ing-wen, said, Taiwan was close to signing the deal with the German plant, but because of China's intervention, we still can't sign the contract, she told a meeting of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. Taipei had previously smoothly ordered shots from AstraZeneca in Britain and Moderna in the United States. So why can't they order from BioNTech? Well, get ready. This is the first time Taiwan has directly accused Beijing of blocking a deal with BioNTech. When asked to comment on the matter, the German firm said, we generally do not comment on potential or ongoing discussions to provide vaccine doses. Shanghai Fosun Pharmaceutical Group signed a deal with BioNTech last year to supply the mRNA vaccines to mainland China, and in March offered to supply some of those vaccines to Taiwan. Under the deal, Fosun, well, at that time, Taiwan didn't have COVID, so they didn't necessarily really need it then. Under the deal, Fosun was given the exclusive right to develop and commercialize the vaccines in China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. Again, Fosun, the Chinese company, had an exclusive deal for China, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. Taiwan reported 635 new coronavirus cases and 11 deaths on Wednesday because they just started having it within the very recent days, although it's going berserk. As authorities searched for some more than 300 people who tested positive at hospital but effectively went missing after it was discovered, the contact information they had provided was fake or illegible. The spike in infections has left the island government scrambling for vaccine supplies, and it has appealed for support both from manufacturers and the United States. Taiwan, which is home to 23 million people, has so far received 700,000 AstraZeneca shots via the COVAX facility, and less than 1% of its population has been vaccinated. That's a problem. It has yet to receive any of the shots it ordered from Moderna. Also a big problem. At the press briefing on Wednesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson did not comment on the Chinese Foreign Ministry did not comment on Taiwan's claims, but said that the channels for Taiwan to obtain vaccines from China were unimpeded. Well, guess what? They don't want vaccines from China. They want it from the manufacturer in Germany for reasons you can imagine. Meanwhile, Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office, so again, Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office spokesperson said 2 non-governmental bodies in Shanghai and Jiangsu had agreed to donate a batch of vaccines to Taiwan. We support and will assist the donation, she said, without specifying the manufacturer or how many doses would be supplied. Well, of course, it's going to be their Sinovac one, which Taiwan doesn't want at all. So we hope that relevant parties in Taiwan will clear obstacles for the delivery to take place as soon as possible. Zhu also criticized Taiwan for not accepting aid from Beijing. And then here's an interesting one. Do you want the Chinese vaccine recognized by the World Health Organization or not? They said. Will you listen to or ignore Taiwan people's will to use the Chinese vaccines? The WHO has granted emergency approval for a vaccine made by Chinese state-owned company Sinopharm. Now you understand the politics at play here. The WHO has granted emergency approval for a vaccine made by Chinese state-owned company Sinopharm. Fosun on Saturday repeated an offer to first made in March to supply Taiwan with their BioNTech vaccines. Taipei rejected the initial offer, saying it would discuss the procurement issue directly with the German company. Tsai said earlier this month that a locally developed COVID-19 vaccine would be ready for use by the end of July. Phase 2 clinical trials of the candidates were almost complete, she said, without elaborating. John, what are your thoughts?
Actually, I wanted to...
John, if I can just say one thing. Tyler, it's not the Sinovac one that got approved by World Health Organization. It's the Sinopharm produced one.
Yeah.
So quick correction there.
I wanted to mention that we actually did the same thing in Brazil. We pressured the Brazilian Bolsonaro government to reject the Sputnik 5 vaccine, and that was admitted by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So this type of politics is, I think, quite natural, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
Well, the issue.
Tyler, could I
Yes,
jump
please,
in here and
please go,
explain some
David.
of the politics?
Yeah, of course, David. Before you do, I just want to highlight Fosun did a Chinese company did a deal. A Chinese mainland company, Fosun, did a deal to be the exclusive distributor to Taiwan, which is not a Chinese territory. So how does that work? Could Mexico become do a deal to be the exclusive distributor of something to America, for example? Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so this is I guess Taiwan is no stranger to something like this. So
well said.
before the JV even took place for the manufacturing of BioNTech vaccines in Shanghai or in China, Fosun actually made an investment as early as last year into BioNTech. And in the initial investment, they've already locked in that they would have exclusive distribution for 4 areas: China mainland, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan.
Correct.
And obviously, to be fair to BioNTech, Taiwan was such a small market to them that they were more than willing to comply in order to get the investment from Fosun.
Precisely.
So right. So what happened is, while the rest of the world knows it as the Pfizer vaccine, obviously BioNTech is the real tech behind it. But when it comes to Greater China, including Taiwan, there's lies the problem. So when the Taiwanese president tried to reach out to Pfizer to acquire this vaccine, obviously they were turned away, and then turned to BioNTech, and then in turn turned to Fosun. But there's one other element within Taiwan that makes this even more complicated, which is there's a natural divide between industries in Taiwan in terms of their political leanings, and then the biotech industry in Taiwan, actually for the most part, is much closer to the current ruling party in Taiwan. So the ruling party has actually done to their credit an incredible job last year in keeping COVID at bay. But at the same time, there's some foul play within the party to delay the purchase of foreign vaccines in order to give local vaccines a chance to come out with the domestic produced products. So there are 2 listed local companies that have been saying that they will come out with the vaccine as early as July of this year. So hence why the government has been pushing back on acquiring foreign vaccines. In fact, there was an acquisition that was supposed to be made last October, but suddenly, the news came out, oh, well, we didn't end up getting it. But because the recent outbreak, then that's when they remember when I told you several weeks ago that they would trade chips for the 5 million doses. And that was what happened when we said 3 days earlier that the news came out that, in fact, the U.S. was sending 5 million doses of Moderna. 150,000 arrived 2 days ago.
Okay, so if you're willing to take credit for it, David did send Cal and I a DM predicting precisely what the mainstream media found out 3 days later. Yes.
Yeah. So, and then the remaining of that 5 million will come out in the next 2 months. And then obviously the US is getting Japan to help supply with AstraZeneca as well. But the reason why the AstraZeneca had such low adoption rate in Taiwan initially was because the mayor of Taipei, which is the capital of Taiwan, who is a former well-respected doctor himself, came out and made a comment and said, the AstraZeneca vaccine, and the doctors on stage sort of helped me out here. I don't remember what the English term is, but there's some problem with adverse effects to the blood. I think the term is called blood
embolism.
I can help you with that. It's a blood clotting disorder. It's generally rare in the general population. It's a little more common than the general population with the AstraZeneca vaccine, but it's much more common than the general population in those infected with COVID. So it's almost a predictable consequence that a vaccine against a virus that causes this syndrome might well itself cause the syndrome. But if you're really worried about getting the syndrome, you should get vaccinated because it lowers the risk of that particular complication versus
Yeah.
getting infected
I
with the
shared
Got
virus.
it.
yesterday on the Science Repository a study that looked into how this can happen. I can share it again. So the theory is because the AstraZeneca really expresses that spike protein, and that spike protein sometimes goes through the nucleus wall, and then makes aggregates of particles, and those aggregations build those blood clots, and if they come to organs, then it turns into complications.
By the
That
way,
was
to
a
put it in
German
Which
perspective,
doesn't
university.
happen with the RNA vaccines because they don't express that protein in that way.
That was
Yeah,
a German
but
researcher who actually did it on Johnson and Johnson as well. So they actually could tweak the vaccine soon for both AstraZeneca and Johnson and Johnson based on that study.
By the way, to put things in perspective, that's called a micromort, which is basically a 1 in a million chance. And it's
Exactly.
actually still a lot safer than not taking the vaccine. And then to put other things in perspective, the birth control pill is actually so much more dangerous. And people have been using that for about 3, 4, 5 decades now. And that's one of the theories why feminism actually succeeded was the birth control pill. And it's a lot more lethal.
much
Right.
more
So
lethal, much
to
more lethal. And
conclude,
I think that's a critical point. Is if you look at the known complications of the vaccine today, which are scientifically tenuous to track, and I read that article in detail, and yes, it makes sense, but has it been corroborated? In a way where it's definitive, we'll only find out if we modify the vaccine and it stops happening, because it's a very complex biochemical mechanism and hypothesis that one study cannot prove. But the point is that any of the vaccine related concerns are also found in the infection itself at higher frequency. So these vaccines are remarkably safe compared to getting the virus itself. This is John. I'm done.
Yeah, I totally agree. The problem is just how our brain works with risk assessment, that we are very irrational statisticians. I'm sorry, in English that word is difficult. So I think that's the problem. We are very irrational decision makers.
Yeah, so we're afraid of terrorism, but we're more likely to die in a bathtub. But to put things in perspective, there's another article in Nature magazine, and in the Nature magazine, it said that if you already suffered from COVID, it's probably going to lead to a lifetime of antibodies, and that actually opens up a second question: is if you've already had COVID, should you bother getting vaccinated? Because it seems like nature has already vaccinated you for a lifetime.
So yeah, there's good circumstantial evidence to answer that question, and it comes from a couple of locations. But the best studied example is in Manaus, Brazil, where they had a 70% infection rate with the first original variant that arrived in Brazil. And they thought that was horrible, hospital overwhelmed, lots of deaths, but at least we have herd immunity with 70+% of the people infected with evidence of that. Unfortunately, the Brazilian variant came to the same city of Manaus and created nearly the same level of infection and hospitalization and death. And so the conclusion is that the original variant does not confer protection, not only lifelong, but not even for a few months against these novel variants. However, in contrast, the research that we have to date on people who were vaccinated and have coverage against the variants with neutralizing antibodies are probably in good shape against all of the variants. Now, whether you can translate that into saying that if you're infected with the Brazil or the South African or the Indian variant, that you have lifelong immunity against all the variants, we don't have enough time to have that data through a natural experiment. But in In the natural experiment in Manaus, we know the original variant is not sufficient for that level of confidence, and we have a lot of laboratory evidence and some increasing circumstantial observational evidence in populations that at least the mRNA and probably AstraZeneca and probably J&J and maybe some of the others do confer long-lasting immunity against all of the viruses, all of the variants, but we won't know until time passes because it's such a complicated proposition.
By the way, if we go back in history, there's Farr's law. It was first postulated in 1840 with the smallpox, and that's really not discussed so much. But it just basically says that a lot of the deaths in an epidemic follow a bell curve. So the people who are most weakest are the ones hit the worst. But then afterwards, once herd immunity starts to kick in, the bell curve it starts to drop, and that's been a general observation throughout history. And was first postulated in 1840, but you don't see that much coverage of that in the news.
Yeah, there are a few people who have speculated exactly what I suspect might be happening, and that is we already have 4 common cold coronaviruses. This is probably going to become the 5th common cold coronaviruses that goes through that bell curve exactly as you're describing, most vulnerable first, and then goes into an endemic background, and we'll have 5 common cold coronaviruses. I suspect that when the other 4 common cold coronaviruses initially emerged into the human population, that they may have caused something similar to what we're seeing with COVID, but then they reached this endemic state where they had already pruned out the people genetically most susceptible to death, and then became much more of a background common cold. One of the implications of that is these syndromes are seeing like long haulers, and it's a very diverse set of syndromes. We may have people who have experienced chronic fatigue syndromes that resemble long hauler syndrome from the common cold coronaviruses, but we just weren't looking to make that connection. So we may see that even though we prune out the most vulnerable, not we, but the virus prunes out the most vulnerable and ends up in an endemic state, that we will begin to identify the preceding cause of various currently unknown cause chronic fatigue syndromes that may have emerged from other viruses, including the common cold coronavirus. So that's speculative, but it conforms to that thesis.
No, and that's what the long COVID and all the researchers are looking into, the myalgic encephalitis, which is a chronic fatigue syndrome, as well as even POTS, postural orthostatic hypertension syndrome. So it'll be interesting times ahead. Unfortunately, not for the acutely impaired.
Yeah, thank you, guys. The Dr. Matt just sent in an article that I'm retweeting from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW, and the headline is Best Buy Health launches Lively Smart for active aging community. Best Buy Health today introduced its new smartphone called Lively Smart that is designed to make it easier than ever for older adults to access the phone features they care most about, including one-touch access to Lively Health and safety services. Users can unlock Lively Smart full potential with these Lively Health and safety services. Kind of sounds like maybe the Geek Squad for health in some sense. Urgent Response, which provides a connection to highly trained agents who can help in emergencies, big or small. If only we could find somebody who's an expert on Best Buy. Does anyone in the room happen to know anyone who might be? I don't know.
Let me ping them in.
Let's ping.
I know
Can you guys
someone.
begin? Yeah.
Can you
I
get?
know someone. Let
But,
me
but
pin him in.
by
Yeah.
the way, there's no Genius
Oh,
Bar
he's
at
already
Best
here,
Buy.
isn't it?
This is old news. This is old news.
I know.
And
Cal, for you it is.
by the way, Cal has been quietly hinting at this. If you could read between the lines, and sometimes not so quietly, but now that it's public, Cal, Best Buy Health, hello, and Urgent Response sounds a bit like as you have been hinting, and I didn't, even though you were saying it, and God knows you would, of all people, would know. But here it is in the headlines, and thank you, Dr. Matt, for finding it and sharing it. I just retweeted it. Our friend Cal Patel here on stage, my beautiful.
Yeah, no, they've been this is the news articles there. It's 149.99 a month, which is 150
Yep, 100.
plus monthly service. Yeah, it's listen, this is even like 10 years ago, this is one of the platforms that um, we were looking at, as well as another platform which is going to
Oh,
was being incubated and it's going
oh,
to go big.
do tell, Cal.
No, I've been hinting on that one as well, but you haven't.
No headlines on
EVs
that
are
one.
our
Yes.
phones. EVs are phones with wheels, right?
Yeah.
So
So,
that's all they
but
are. They're
this is
like,
really
yeah,
interesting that the fact that Best Buy, which every American in the audience knows, and a lot of people in Asia know because you are running Best Buy Asia, but the Europeans know Media Mart, I guess, is the good example for them, right? But the idea that Best Buy or something like Media Mart in Europe goes into health and launching, an app and urgent response, which provides connection to highly trained agents who can help in emergencies, big or small, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the push of a button, is a truly fantastic offering for America. I think it's genius, but it is a bit of a new path forward for Best Buy. And I'm wondering, we talked about Google announced this week that they're getting into healthcare. We announced that JP Morgan Chase is also doing their own big initiative. We've been covering Amazon's recent developments in these spaces, and this is a lot of big non-tech companies getting very big into medtech. Yes, Cal?
Tyler, you just mentioned JP Morgan.
Yes.
They disbanded the joint venture with Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway.
Correct.
So that joint venture just lasted for 3 years.
Correct.
So that's an interesting thing to put into context as well.
Well, yeah, but that's why they just
This is John.
announced
This
this
is John.
week,
If I could,
Sal, the new news this week is that
Yeah.
JP Morgan announced their own private initiative separate
No,
from
no,
Amazon and Berkshire.
no, I know that. I'm
Okay.
saying it's the previous one failed and they
Yes.
walked away from that. And
Yes.
it's interesting to see why they did that.
Yes. John?
yeah,
I will say that the
yeah,
difference here is Great Call, right? I mean, I know Cal can speak to it, but the acquisition of Great Call a long time ago, and they've known, people don't know this, but Best Buy
Yeah.
has been in the active aging space for some time, and that's I think what Cal was referring to. They've
yeah,
learned this space,
and
they've
yeah, they've been
examined this
building.
space, and now they're
Yeah, they built the acquisition of Great Call, and then this deal uh, with the Lively team, and and they're building it up now. How fast they go, I don't know, because I'm not there. But before I went off to run the Asia business, I ran all the growth at Best Buy in globally, and that's why international was one of the growth things, and that's why I went off to kind of close it up and do various things there. But literally, this was one of the platforms that we've been incubating. And Corey Berry, if you look at all our annual reports, this is the only one you'll see in her statements, etc., that they're betting on. And they see the over 65. This is the gray economy too. We talked about this, Tyler.
Silver
Every
economy.
time we
Yeah.
talked about the silver economy. Sorry, yeah. And every time we've talked about that, I've said these guys are going to be in this game big time. And the broader trend behind it is people in their homes, like giving people the autonomy to live in their homes and have the autonomy. And they've got a chief medical officer. They've got a new person running the division from the medical profession. If you look in their websites and you look at all that, so they've been Corey's been building this capability for a while, and they test stuff. We're testers and experimenters. That's what we were in our. I say R because it's like a company that sits with you in your life, because a wonderful place. But they test and experiment like crazy. So just look at all their experiments. They've been playing around with this with Geek Squad for a long time. The challenge now is as a public company, the bet here has to be like really really big, right? And go into the data and the so they're very reluctant to do acquisitions, but they're not reluctant to do partnerships. So that's all I'll say.
And I could, as someone outside of Best Buy, and I wish I'd known Cal 10 years ago, because I've been working on this on the outside periphery, yelling at people to take note. And actually, I've been referring small startups, health startups, to Best Buy, basically saying that go contact them because they could actually be a great distribution channel for everything, like everything from a home automation for disabled individuals to wheelchair autonomous wheelchair add-ons. They're in Toronto. They actually contacted them, and they've actually been working with them. Also, another thing too, the phone thing. I knew about this a long time ago when I bought Doro phones for some of my seniors. So Doro is a Swedish company, Tyler, and they actually made the first few phones for elderly people. And later on, only America's the phones in the U.S. were big, and that Best Buy bought over. But definitely the competition's heating up. Amazon, I would bet you, is going to be the biggest competitor to Best Buy, unless Amazon for some reason buys Best Buy. I don't know.
Or you
That's
have partnerships.
Yeah. So I mean, you guys had the storefronts, which is the best. The retail
So
spaces
so
all
here's
over
the
the place.
thing. And you know, so here's the thing. You've got Apple as well, right? They have storefront. But the footprint in the US, I'm talking about the US, the footprint for consumers and the space Best Buy has, right?
Yeah.
And they've got Geek Squad, and they've got, and they can, they, so the underneath Geek Squad is not just Geek Squad. All right, today, when Geek Squad started, they're repairing computers, right? Then they started repairing everything. They became the service brand. We grew it. I was involved in bringing Geek Squad into the business with 15 people, right? And then you know, we kind of grew that business, and it kind of became the service brand. But what's underneath it, which people never pay attention to about companies, is your ability to do something, right? So Best Buy is an ability to pull together,
Mm.
like a squad, whatever the squad is, Med Squad. That's the capability, right?
They got
And
mobile
and that
networks connected.
Yes, and then you pull that squat, and then you can scale like crazy. So if anybody can scale this, it's Best Buy really, really fast. However, yeah, Amazon has some pieces in the puzzle
Yeah.
that either Best Buy builds themselves or does something about that.
Because Best Buy has that last mile advantage. Like they could actually get to your door and do things for you, while Amazon just ships it to you. And also, one more thing you have to realize: the most ubiquitous item in every person's home is a TV, right? And so TVs, I just recently bought an Android smart TV and I've been playing with it for my parents, right? Because I could actually program it, have Nest communicate with it, so many things. It's amazing. So Apple moving into the TV space may be a clue into what they're also planning to do. Best Buy has TVs and they go and install TVs in people's homes. So remember that too. So there is that angle that you could take where the TV could be the way to enter some of these homes. And I feel that's the case for the senior population.
Let's change topics for a second. David, you just shared an article from South China Morning Post about apparently semiconductors.
Yeah, so with the Endless Frontier Act having passed the Senate and now going into the House,
Not
the
yet.
China.
Not yet.
What?
Sorry. The Endless Frontiers Act got through a procedural hurdle on Friday, and then a couple of Republican senators held up the deal. So it's going to be probably voted on next week to pass the Senate.
Right. Okay. Fine. So China is ramping up its investment into the field as well, and so the latest I have from the conference I attended is that they will be matching the number the U.S. is putting towards this industry, and hopefully make significant progress in this area. But I guess the biggest challenge is getting their hands on a lot of the production equipment, including the EUV equipment from ASML, and the lead time on these manufacturing equipment is incredibly long, and they also have a very limited production capacity. So I just don't know whether or not this is going to become another futile exercise where everyone sort of goes milking at the teat of this huge central government led initiative, or there's going to be real substance coming out of this move.
I just retweeted your article, and Justin, jump in here. It says Chinese President Xi Jinping seeks to rally the country's scientists for an unprecedented contest. Chinese leader promises to boost investment and free scientists from bureaucracy as Joe Biden seeks heavy increases in U.S. research budgets. This is all about semiconductors, by the way. There's literally a new space race underway between China and the U.S. To become self-sufficient in semiconductors because they're both rather dependent on Taiwan at the moment. Xi and then the U.S. is making very impressive progress, I have to say, under Biden with the help of TSMC and Intel and other players are throwing billions of dollars to build lots of factories in the Arizona area. And now China, of course, needs to match that to David's point. And David consistently has insider information that he DMs us days before the headline, the mainstream media shares it. But in this case, Xi says the country must seek breakthroughs in areas such as artificial intelligence and semiconductors, as he warns of a major battle between great powers. As I sort of just said, China should prepare for unprecedented scientific and technical competition, which has become the main battleground of global power rivalry. President Xi Jinping has said in a rallying call to the country's scientists. Just to give you a little context to how seriously they're taking this, Xi said China needed to speed up its efforts to tackle technological bottlenecks and make breakthroughs in key areas such as artificial intelligence, semiconductors, quantum technology, life science, and energy, in a speech to mark the country's National Day for Science and Research on Sunday. And again, the language they're using is this is an unprecedented scientific technology competition, which has become the main battleground of global power rivalry. Now, one part, pardon me, Justin. Something that David said that is critically important and I think everyone overlooked. You mentioned that the bottleneck is actually a very interesting little company in the Netherlands, ASML. And it would be very interesting. No doubt China is willing to do whatever, and May's flashing her mic because she's there in Amsterdam. So it was going to be very interesting, those meetings and those emails and those calls between China, Beijing, and Amsterdam. Or I'm assuming ASML is somewhere near Amsterdam. But no doubt America is telling its friends in the Netherlands, do not under any circumstances provide Beijing with what they're asking for. We will give you anything you ever dreamed of to prevent them from getting what they need to fulfill their vision. And now you've got the Netherlands right in the middle of this incredible global showdown of semiconductors, which is truly fascinating. Yeah.
By the way, I want to give a little bit of historical context. So there was a space race in the 60s, and there was a call to arms back then. It was the Soviet Union versus us. And what happened was there was actually a glut of engineers, of rocket scientists in particular. And there were so many of them that eventually many of them became New York City cab drivers. And so it'll be funny if there's going to be Chinese semiconductor engineers who later on might become cab drivers as well.
Okay, cab drivers.
Don't worry, let me share my thoughts.
The beautiful thing here is, from the U.S. perspective at least, is that the National Science Foundation, whether you agree with this or not, and Dr. Danish has very good perspective about why he may not be fully in favor of this, but let's give the political context where I can comment pretty authoritatively on. Over the last 2 decades, there's essentially been an attack on expertise by mainly the GOP, and therefore they've been discounting academic experts, and in turn they've been ultimately limiting science funding. So the way that they've cut budgets is through cutting funding going to the National Science Foundation. However, because of the change in rhetoric, sorry, I'm walking up a hill here, so I'm out of breath. Because of the way that the rhetoric has been changing towards China, as evidenced first with Bernie Sanders and the AFL-CIO, which is a liberal union organization, and then by Donald Trump and the recent GOP over the past 4 years, China has become a main focal point and literally a point of bipartisanship in the United States. So it's taken a long while for the United States politicians, for the United States society, and just our citizens to realize that there actually is a great power competition going on, in large part fueled by foreign direct investment from the United States into China after Nixon opened it up. However, as I mentioned, the last few decades has resulted in an attack on science funding. The United States now sees the way to compete against China as not becoming protectionist, but no. Instead, reshoring high-tech capacity and essentially becoming not only a main innovator or maintaining a main innovating status of these different technologies, but also eventually being the country that China is kind of now to export new green technology throughout the world into emerging markets, specifically India and also China. So the way that politicians are now approaching this is the Republicans who used to be against funding the NSF. The original bill started out at $110 billion, and it's going to literally do what David said. It's going to go to advanced manufacturing. It's going to go towards semiconductors. It's going to go towards university research and essentially the technologies of the next decade or two. This bill has now ballooned to $250 billion.
Wow.
And while it's been stalled in the Senate, you have bipartisan support. The initial version of this bill passed the Senate with 86 votes. Now, folks, just to kind of put that in perspective, once this piece of legislation passes the House, which there are questions if it does, and once it gets signed into law, this will likely be the last major piece of bipartisan legislation to pass before the 2022 elections, which happen in November. So you're essentially going to go a year and a half without another major piece of bipartisan legislation passing. And that's all to say that while these investments are huge, and in my opinion, I think that it's a good thing for our science sector, our research sector, and everything moving forward. This is just step one. When the United States goes full throttle, it's because of the messaging narrative changes, and ultimately they see an existential threat. Look at the space program in the 60s. We saw Russia as an existential threat, and we reoriented our whole budget to basically try and beat them to the moon. This is another way of another space race where the politicians and the narrative has now turned. And it's like an aircraft carrier. Once it begins to turn, and once it's finally turned, and it's in the right direction, it is fucking difficult to change it. So this is going to be full steam ahead for at least the next decade. The United States politicians are awake. They're taking this seriously, and the full force of the United States government is directed at this.
By the
There's
way,
a
Justin, we
counterpoint.
have
One
the
thing I wanted to add.
highest tariffs ever since Smooth Holly. So we are actually much more protectionist than we ever were since basically the 1920s.
So one
So
comment
there's
about
another
the NSF.
component in here that's sort of
All trade
crucial.
experts would disagree with that, but keep going.
Go ahead, David.
So there's another component in here that's kind of crucial, Tyler, in addition to the EUA equipment from ASML, which is if everyone takes a look at the 2019 Japan-Korea trade dispute, there are Japanese companies that basically manufacture these chemicals used in semiconductor manufacturing, and they have the global monopoly on this. It's effectively, and I'm dumbing this down to a level that's just a little inappropriate, but it's effectively an adhesive glue that's used in the semiconductor manufacturing process. And the trade dispute between Japan and Korea is really what a huge factor in what caused Korea to be massively behind Taiwan or TSMC in the production process. So I think this is also part of the U.S. initiative in really pulling Japan and Korea close into its fold, because these are other parts of the critical component in terms of the supply chain that they're trying to choke off from China in this push to make chips domestically.
As someone from
And
the
one thing I
weakest
just
country, oh
wanted to
sorry,
bring up, I'm sorry, this is Danish. I just wanted to bring up one point that I know I mentioned in the other room, and Justin, thank you for bringing the topic up again. I think one of the approaches that really separates us from China's approach is that what they did and the way they went about it was, one, they reduced bureaucracy, which was a huge part of it. But secondly, they actually focused very much in the academic space, which I'm still recovering from, on early investigator research and really going after not the stuffy old professors who, by the way, represent the large majority of NSF and NIH funding, but they focused on trying to get more people into the academics, getting into PhDs, and actually building their own labs. And that's why, actually, if you look across the country in China, there are a lot of rising stars, which is not the case in academia here in the US. That's number one. Number two, they didn't focus on entrepreneurial support organizations, which some of us founders who've had the privilege of being able to build large companies, the ESOs were not the reason why we were able to do that. The ecosystems were. And they, China has put a lot of money into building ecosystems, not giving money to a bunch of people that are quote unquote building the network, which really has shown in multiple cities to not work. So a lot of the money that's being earmarked for this is actually going to some of these entrepreneurial support organizations in St. Louis, where I'm at, or in other cities where they really are not even the center of impact. And so I did want to bring up that while the top line numbers are great, and I'm very, very happy that more money is going to the R&D, I think we're going to find that allocation of that money is going to be a big problem, and we're going to only worsen the disparities between the people that have and people that do not have.
Can I just provide
If
some
I can add
perspective
on to
on
what
China?
We'll go John and
So
then Leon. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
John, talk
so
first.
if I could add on to what Dr. Danish just said, because it's just right on the money. About 10 years ago, when the BRAIN Initiative was first announced and the funding for it, I asked Larry Smarr, who's one of the greatest visionary polymaths in science, who's actually created numerous innovations. Over the years. When I asked him what he thought of that, he said, it's the same old, same old. They allocate a big chunk of money. It goes to the guys in their 60s who did good research 20, 40, 50, or 20 or 40 years ago at the expense of the young innovators who are thinking differently about the same problems. And he views it as a fixture of the science funding landscape in the U.S. But to Dr. Danish's point, if we don't change that, we will see much more innovation coming out of countries that foster innovation and research amongst much younger researchers than what we are traditionally doing in the U.S. So the announcement of any new large chunk of money dedicated to a particular theme or topic is almost certainly going to be distributed through the good old boy network, which is not how to do innovation.
And that was the problem with the COVID, all these COVID research projects that started up early on. All the money got siphoned off to projects that said COVID immediately, right? Even though they had no sort of real long history of focus on the virus or treating the pandemic.
Exactly.
Every system will be gamed,
Hold
and
on,
there's gatekeepers in every system. So that's going to happen with everything.
Leon, go ahead.
Sure. So I want to share two stories. The first one, probably I mentioned before. There's a Chinese version of GPS called Baidu, or like I
Yeah,
don't know what's the English name,
we covered it
right?
2 days ago. Yep.
Yeah,
Is it in the
yeah.
is it in
So
the vaccine, Leon?
No,
Is it
no,
going to be injected? Okay.
no.
no, it's not vaccine. I don't. Vaccine is not the only thing I know. I'm like a two-trick pony. Okay,
Okay.
that's another trick.
Yeah.
So if you look at the engineers who made this happen, their average age of the whole team. Imagine a team who built Chinese version of a GPS.
Yep.
The average age is around 30. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
imagine that in the United
But they
States.
had cheat notes, though. They had cheat notes.
Wow, they have everything.
Yeah, but that's not the point, Heyman. And
Come
the
on.
point
We,
is that the best stuff that's coming out of this country in the US is
Yes.
coming from entrepreneurs and innovators and academics even that are earlier on in their career. And I think that's the point. And so while Sal, I appreciate your thought process on, well, things are going to be gamed. Absolutely, but perhaps
Yep.
the game should be rigged for the people that are building the newest technologies instead of the people that are doing the same old thing that they've been doing for the last 40 years. I think that's sort of the main point that I think we're all trying to say.
And also,
There's a
Dinesh,
lot
I
of
think the
money going into
one
this.
point I'm trying to make is the fact that they should give accreditation to the people who've actually created it too, right? Because I think the patent laws around the world are messed up. Because if China, for instance, takes, remember, they have a goal of 2025. And that's why you see all this acceleration of everything from space to GPS to roads to everything. Because the Xi has this policy where he wants China to be self-sufficient. How do you do that? How do you boost it? Yes, you steal technologies, which has been going on for ages, right? And they're technically, it's the US's fault for underestimating the whole issue. And
There
I
were,
think, sorry?
so my
oh,
second
yeah,
example. Sorry, I said
yeah,
I
no,
have two, right? My
I
second
just
one. Can I
very,
just finish, please?
Go ahead,
go
Leon.
ahead.
Otherwise, I'm gonna jump on you.
Whoa.
So I just heard about like some experts, actually U.S. experts, sorry, actually Canadian experts, who is an AI expert. They quoted me one number. It's in the past couple of years, Chinese submit around 4,000 patents, or sorry,
Yep.
4,000
I told you
publications
that.
of AI, right? We were in the same zone, right, Heyman? Like
Yeah,
what Christian, right? Christian said that, or you said that,
I said
and
that.
yeah, okay, sorry, so sorry, I
And the
misspoke.
Canadian
It's
too.
your number, yeah. And the United States have how many? 2,500. So China beat the United States in terms of a basic research of AI, big margin. That's the problem, actually. I think, we saw there like a TikTok cannot be replicated by the by the US company, not because Chinese stole this or protected this, because they just have more engineers, right? They're pretty good.
No, they are.
Like
I admit it, but
there.
also you have to
Yes.
think of it this way, right? Because also think of it this way: they all these patents were also like they came from labs that were open, right? They came from people who were actually very keen on sharing their information from North American labs or European labs. Chinese, I mean, you can easily submit it. Anyone could take an idea and quickly submit it for a patent. It doesn't mean that that patent is going to be worth much, but I'm just saying, like, it could be just also a political thing too, right? To submit as much as you can.
And Heyman, this is John. The
If
one of the NFT
historic
rooms.
perspective, it's quite a joke that European countries and also US with all the colony history now whine about, that their ideas are stolen. I mean, with all the riches and a lot of technology and progress was hold or freeze in those colonized countries, which include a lot of Asian countries. So I think giving away some knowledge doesn't even make it close to be fair nowadays for
By the way, the British
other
had
people.
an embargo on exporting textile manufacturing technology, and we
Yep.
stole it from them about 150,
This
180
was a
years ago.
really
Searle.
productive discussion before the
Sorry,
one
John
abouters
was going to
came
say
in.
something, guys. One sec.
Yeah. I just
John.
want
Go ahead,
30,
John.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Go ahead.
In an NFT room 2 days ago, a concept was floated which made so much sense to me. It's going to be very complicated, but what they proposed is, what if NFTs become the mechanism of claiming prior art,
Ooh.
exposing it publicly, and licensing it, and bypassing the Byzantine structure of patent law around the world through global use of NFTs to expose and license new innovations? It really could be a game changer. Lots of complications. Could be a game changer.
What about
Yeah,
URL rot?
but
NFTs can disappear and they can be hijacked as well.
anybody can submit an NFT. So,
Yep.
that's the problem with NFTs. And just to what Katerina was saying, the problem isn't that it's coming out of an Asian country, this innovation. The problem is that it's not a democratic country. So that's the issue with, having technology coming out from China.
Well, here's
I
a
don't think it
headline.
matters where it's coming from,
I
right?
don't understand why there's a problem with the technology not coming from democratic countries.
Oh, here's an
What's the
example.
relationship between them?
So there was
Please educate me.
yeah, I will. Hopefully, this article might help educate everybody. So Leon, you're familiar with Huawei and how America has a very strong block on Huawei, which is traditionally a hardware company. And it's been reported recently that Huawei CEO has made the statement they're going to shift focus to become a very strong player in software. And so now there's a report that I just shared from the Tech News Twitter account, so everyone can read it for themselves. There's now a leaked Huawei memo reveals the plans about Huawei's software plans here. And it's quite interesting with comments directly from the CEO. Let me make sure that it's now in our Twitter account. Yes, it is. You can read it for yourself. Here it goes. Chinese tech vendor Huawei has been forced out of much of its hardware business by unilateral U.S. restrictions, so it plans to return the favor in software. We know this because Reuters reported on a recent internal memo sent by Huawei CEO Ren Zhengfei covering the strategic pivot to software. While the cunning plan itself is no secret, the memo sheds more light on the internal culture driving it and expected long-term consequences of this strategy. Here's the quote. Once we dominate Europe, the Asia Pacific, and Africa, if US standards don't match ours and we can't enter the US, then the US can't enter our territory, the memo reportedly said. As Huawei is not merely seeking to focus on markets the U.S. will be less able to ban it from. It wants to ban the U.S. right back. There are also so many presumptions built into the statement, it would be easy to dismiss it as the ravings of a megalomaniac if it didn't coincide so closely with the border Chinese Belt Road strategy. And the article we just shared about why Leon's company Fosun is banning Taiwan from getting vaccines that it's looking for from BioNTech. That's partly the problem, Leon, is your company Fosun is not allowing Taiwan to get the vaccine that it would like to get from the company would
Yeah,
like to buy
sure.
from.
Let me respond both. First, Huawei, then Fosun, my company. Not my company. I wish my company I would be nice. I can be buying your island next to your Tyler.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Okay.
So let's first Huawei. Let me ask you, what did Apple do when they try to dominate the market? They're making fucking the gadget not compatible with the PC, right? I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, why a Chinese company doing like the playbook Apple? People have problem with that. If you can be so big, you can dominate the market, can corner the market. Why not? That's maximize the profit. Oh, by the way, what Huawei is doing, if Huawei were public company controlled by Wall Street, Huawei would be dead already, because the shareholder gonna sell their stock like crazy when US decide to let's say ban Huawei. But the company, like I said, right, I had a really miserable growth, 4%. I think I applaud. If I were a stakeholder, I'm pretty happy. Look at this. This company had been banished by so many countries, and they survived, and they pivot to another sector. I think that's great. If I were a VC, I can still put in my money there. That's about Huawei. That's my thought. I mean, as a capitalist, right? About my company, not my company, my parent company, Fosun Pharma. I only shared the news with you also from South China Morning Post. Actually, Taiwan is relaxing the ban on Fosun vaccine, if you may, Fosun BioNTech vaccine. And also, you say I changed my title to Wuger Sahin. Wuger Sahin doesn't care for this political game. He's a great man. Oh, by the way, I think we all so petty in front of him. If he were here, he would laugh his ass off, to be honest with you. He's like, I just a physician, want to save as many people's life as possible. What you guys are talking about? I mean, he's rich, by the way, right? But he really, I mean, the reason he partnered with the Pfizer, with the Fosun, now with the Singapore, he's very simple-minded. I mean, in a good way. Physician. He's a good doctor. He just want to save lives. Whatever makes sense, right? He doesn't do this for money. Let's just put it this way. If you don't believe me, look at his title. His title from his LinkedIn, he's a professor, right? He's not a CEO or some whatever. He doesn't care. So that's about that. So Fusan, you know what? The Taiwan government take us, that's fine. You don't take it, that's also fine. I don't care. I mean, it's not my money, to be honest with you.
Oh,
But it looks like the Taiwan's government under pressure right now because of their citizen from Taiwan. Taiwan is my friend. Actually, I was in their room last night. They were not happy with what the government is doing. Like Justin, you can say whatever you like, but I can tell you, if you talk to, last night I was in a room with more than 700 Taiwanese in the room. The general sentiment is they were not happy with what their government is doing. If I were them, I won't be happy either, right? Every single day of a delay of a vaccine, some people are gonna die. Simple like that. You can sugarcoat whatever you like, political conflicts, everything. And people die. Oh, by the way, the mayor from Taipei, this guy lost his shit. He lost his shit about what the central government was doing. I heard the mayor of Taipei is a physician. I feel his pain. I mean, I'm a fake doctor, but I have shared a philosophy, like the same morality as a physician, right? Those are things just stupid, pure stupidity, right? And it's immoral. What is a political game? People are dying because we are playing this game. This is Liam Dan speaking.
We agree on that part. People are going to die because of the political game somebody's playing here.
And I don't mind, Leon, that the company that's based in China is actually supporting democratic countries in Taiwan, Singapore. They'll have the sales to those countries, right?
Well, I don't want to. I don't even
No,
want to
no.
engage him. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I need
But
to.
Justin, now
There's a
show your
disclaimer right
political
here. So
rationale.
first off,
Why they shouldn't buy shit from China? Tell me why.
yeah. So I just want a disclaimer right here. People are gonna die because of the decision of that company, not the Taiwanese government. First, second, Clubhouse is used by different propagandists from different governments trying to gaslight you people. I'm not going to go and refute point by point what we just heard. I just really ask that you go and you Google this information and that you're very discerning when you listen to people talk about topics on Clubhouse, because some of them are good at gaslighting and good at propaganda, and then there's Leon. So I just wanted to kind of
Justin,
make
you
that
forgot
clear.
another word. Justin, your favorite word, what about ism? I'll check that out. That's a really nice word. You break about that. Drop that, please. Then you complete. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah. So India's Tata we covered a few days ago because we are in our other time zone. By the way, today being Saturday is an unscheduled version of Tech News Around the World, which, by the way, we've been,
unscheduled for 5 weeks in a row.
Yes, and we were until a few minutes ago the largest room in Clubhouse for the past hour or so. We just got past.
Tyler.
Yeah, but the article I want to bring up here real quickly, and I'll hand it to whoever I just cut off. That India's Tata buys major stake. Reuters now reporting what we covered earlier this week, thanks to our friends on the ground in India. That India, thankfully, Reuters is now catching up to Tech News Around the World to recover the breaking headline that India's Tata is buying major stakes in online grocer called Big Basket as they expand their ever-growing empire to cover the very big play of real-time food delivery. Yes, sorry to whoever I cut off. There was a lady on stage?
I think it was Cheryl and I both were trying to say something. Cheryl, did you want to share first? And then
No, you go ahead. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, Tyler, I was just going to casually change the subject to the headline that Apple sneaking in a long article about their CarPlay, and then they kind
I
of
got it
throw
right
in
here.
there.
I just retweeted your article, did I not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
here it is. Apple's massive success with CarPlay paves the way for automotive ambitions from CNBC. I just tweeted Amanda's article. Thank you for finding this, Amanda. And by the way, that's how this room works is people, brilliant folks like Amanda, find fantastic articles on the internet. No one person can find all the fantastic articles. And yet all of us together can find fantastic articles. Amanda tweeted it out, included our account, TNATW, Tech News Around the World. I saw it, and I just retweeted it to our now 1,300 plus and very quickly growing Twitter following, which we hope you join as well. So you can see all of these fantastic articles that we all collectively find and can share. And so this headline is truly fantastic. Thank you, Amanda. Apple introduced CarPlay in 2014 as a way to integrate the iPhone and the car's dashboard in the U.S. In the United States, over 80% of new cars support Apple's new CarPlay. Apple's success with CarPlay explains the automotive industry's interest in rumors that Apple plans to build a car of its own. And when Elon Musk was interviewed recently about the rumors of Apple having its own car company, Elon got a very funny look on his face, and the reporter said, "So, how do you feel? Do you think the rumors are true?" And he said, "Well, you can't exactly hire 1,000 engineers and keep it a secret, especially engineers that he's competing to hire." So he knows perfectly damn well that Apple's building a car. It's not at all and he even said it's an open secret during the interview. But this article goes into that at some length, and I wonder if we should turn it to our friend Greg Duffy on stage for any comments on CarPlay, Apple's CarPlay, or indeed the rumors of an Apple car.
He stepped out.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he's not here now.
Okay.
Do you remember the story when supposedly Elon Musk tried to sell Tesla to Tim Cook?
Yes.
And Tim Cook wouldn't even give him a meeting?
Correct. Yes, I do.
But speaking of Tesla, I don't know if you guys covered this, but Tesla is turning on the in-cabin camera to watch people. Did you cover that already?
We did this week, but in a different context. That's a new version of the headline. But go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, well, they're turning on. They're all the new cars, I guess, including now the S and X that's been remodeled, have an in-cabin camera right near the rear view mirror that can see the entire car, and that's useful in a robo-taxi so that you can make sure people aren't destroying your car while they're driving around, or lane people appropriately when they do. But they're actually turning, and it never was turned on before, but now they're turning it on to watch the driver to make sure the driver is paying attention while the car is in autopilot mode, and it can actually see where you're looking, if you're looking straight ahead versus up and down. And there's actually this guy who's called Green the Only. He's a Tesla hacker. He hacks his own car. He basically has full access to the computer in his own car. And he was actually trying this out by taking printed pictures of his face and putting it in front of the camera to see if it would be fooled by all of that. And he was watching the signals coming back from the cars. Actually, a pretty cool video of that. Anyway, so that's an interesting thing that they're starting to do that, and it kind of ties into the previous discussions in this room about eye tracking and things. This is not eye tracking in quite the same way, but they are watching your eyes to see if you're looking forward and things like that. So
Yes,
anyway, I thought
it is.
an interesting little development.
Very much is. And it plays into Cal's point about Tesla's inevitable future as an insurance company for their own vehicles. And these
There's
camera.
an interesting
Yeah.
related story, though.
Yes.
Apple, it's from the details of, it just came out May 28th. It says that Apple's looking into supply chains for cars and details, and it says that it's since starting its 2015 Project Titan, it's been sort of studying the supply chains. And we know Tim Cook is the expert on supply chains. So they're actually saying they believe in 3 to 4 years it could be a reality. And Apple's actually looking in every detail of the automotive supply chain. I could tweet that out shortly.
For obvious reasons that we will all experience in a future keynote.
And also, just if I can just stick in one, I have to get going. So just one eco news thing, which you also might have covered, because I believe Cheryl tweeted this out at one point. Adani agreeing to buy SoftBank Energy India for 3.5 billion from SoftBank, and it's basically the article is generally about there's a lot of movement now in India in the renewable energy front. I'm familiar with a company called Renew Energy, which at least until recently was certainly one of the biggest renewable players in India. And the point is that everyone thinks that India is going to keep going with coal. And actually, when you really dig down into the technical details of that, it's actually not as promising for coal as it sounds. India has pretty crappy coal, and it's not located in the same place where the power plants are. And so that just makes the whole thing rather inefficient. And the renewables are now getting, of course, cheaper than coal, even in India. And so the good news is that this is all of a sudden, really, all in the last 2 years or so, that this is all like transformed in India. But renewable energy is really getting a foothold there. A lot of investments going on. Adani I mentioned, and SoftBank was there, and so there's a lot happening, and it's quite promising. Although obviously it has to happen a lot faster than it's happening. But the good news is that there seems to be the beginnings of a switch away from coal power to renewables in India.
Didn't Germany increase their coal consumption after they decided to shut down a lot of the nuclear facilities? And we're actually the biggest exporter of coal to them.
Right. Well,
yes, they did.
But they're also a huge. I mean, Germany, which is not a sunny place, also has a huge percentage of their energy comes from renewables because a long time ago they put in a fee called a feed-in tariff where they would pay you for generating solar power, and that caused a run on solar panels around the world, which actually played a material role in reducing the cost of solar power. So you can trace back. I mean, solar's been dropping for a long time, but that was really a big push that really helped propel the solar industry forward. And people blame Germany for charging too much money and all that kind of stuff, but it ended up being a really good thing for the world overall. So,
Yeah,
but you're right. You're right about the coal thing, and nuclear is 1,000 times safer than coal power by any measure you want to use, including deaths per kilowatt hour. Millions of people die every year from coal power, every single year. And, dozens of people have died from nuclear power. And even in the worst case, it still would not be as bad as coal. But people do crazy things.
Solar panels were dropping in price every year with the exception of this year. This is the first time it's actually gone up in price. It went up about 15, 20%. But they say that's to do with the supply chain. So it's probably going to go back down again over the next couple of years.
So absolutely.
It looked like Greg jumped back in the room. Greg, we were talking about Apple CarPlay, and we found a couple of headlines about the Apple Car. Heyman found an article about they're eagerly looking at supply chains for all sorts of elements to the car. Any thoughts on the inevitable future of an Apple Car?
I think he jumped back out.
Oh, he's on my screen. He's here. That's weird. Okay, sorry about that. An interesting headline from Cheryl.
Self-driving car?
Yeah, I just
Can I plug in one more?
One second. I just shared a headline from
Taylor.
Yes, I'm here.
Can I tell you my opinion about Apple Car?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, Milos.
I don't think that it will happen. If it will happen, I don't think it will happen in this first half of this decade because I don't. I cannot imagine that Apple can compete with this car against Tesla or somebody else.
Okay.
So basically, especially from the battery point of view, they will not have batteries.
Okay. Cam, you did a car company. What's your take on Apple Car?
Going back to what Miller said, Apple is really into high margin profit. Car companies don't make that much profit. If Apple wants to do it, it should be for a bigger play. And I don't think they would acquire any company. So I go with him that unless they come with innovation on battery. If they come with innovation battery that is game changer, then suddenly they skyrocket and they leave Tesla behind.
And that's where
Actually,
we,
Cam,
yeah. But Milo's,
sorry, Cam,
yep. Sorry.
Resvani Autos, are they going to be having CarPlay in your vehicles?
Uh, if it's just a factory CarPlay, just like an Android Auto, I believe
Yeah,
we could have that as an option, but we don't have a sophisticated infotainment like Tesla. I mean, we
right.
did talk about it, but I think our next project is electrification of the tank. That is
So that's why I'm wondering whether Apple that's the play, because QNX in Canada, which is owned by BlackBerry,
BlackBerry. Yes, I
yeah,
know.
which is actually the one of the leading manufacturers of infotainment and all the electronics inside the car, right? Dashboard information. So I'm curious whether Apple will go after that market, which is the key, right? The interface to the car.
That
So,
might be better if they come up with the, you know, this is another discussion for Michael in the VR room, but the VR headset could actually be part of a car. So if Apple comes up with a add-on, which I think is a much bigger play than building a car, aftermarket add-on to make a car, smart car, any car, smart car, whether it's new or old, I think is a market that Apple will go after.
Gabby, you wanted to jump
Or
in?
windshield.
Yeah,
And
I
by the
just
way,
wanted to add.
Hold on, Gabby.
Yeah, this is Gabby. Yeah, Gabby. I just wanted to add that I know for a fact that Tesla is investing into bidirectional battery companies because I'm an advisor slash consultant for one based out of Canada. I can't say the name because I signed an NDA.
Ballard.
Breaking news.
Tyler, can you invite Chokalingam up? Because he's
Yeah,
in charge of Bloom Technologies, which is a battery manufacturer.
Yeah. What's the name again?
I'm in. I,
Chokalingam? Oh,
I, I'll tell
I
you
think he
guys later,
went
but
away.
just my day job, I'm an environmental scientist for the federal government here in United States. So I know a lot about coal-fired power plants and stuff like that. But in addition to that, Apple is building nearby where I currently live, where I'm talking to you now, which is in Raleigh, North Carolina. They're building a company here and about to have the market here as far as jobs and stuff go big. And most people are speculating because they want to compete with Harman, which is the interior of most people, not the interior dashboard of most cars. They've kind of ran that, and but I'll look out to see when they start doing, the advertisements for who they want to hire to say if that's confirmed or not.
Gabby, fantastic. Thank you for that.
can,
Yeah,
can I?
welcome back, by the way. It's been a little while. Yeah.
So
Thank you.
my take on what Apple is doing, and it's not no inside information here, but if you take a look at, you want a high margin business and you want to really be a big player in a new industry, you develop an autonomous vehicle and you wait until the time is right, and then you launch it as a service. You don't sell cars to people, you just sell trips. And that's, of course, what Tesla's doing too, right? They're they're going to have an app that you can dedicate your car to the fleet. But with Apple does it, they can just finance it all themselves and just compete with Tesla by rolling out cars quickly to, like, to start off in cities and whatever. And then you're selling transportation services. You're not selling cars, and then your margins are super high. Tesla estimated that everyone who owns a Model 3 can make $200,000 off that car once it's run as a robo taxi. Well, I haven't done the economics myself, but that's certainly possible. So if you look at it from that point of view, Apple can be not going where the puck is now, but skating to where it's going to be.
Especially when
Anyway,
you
I'm done. Thanks.
especially when you factor in the fact that Apple's trying to build an ad network and Tesla is not, and then they could have ad subsidized rides to undercut Tesla.
By the way, there's always the cybersecurity implications of all of this. So the Jeep famously was hacked. The Wired journalist featured it by Charlie Miller. That was a couple of years ago. The minute we start moving to all of this as a services, we're going to deal with surveillance, mass surveillance, not just by the government but by hackers, and also the endangerment of the passengers. So I think there's going to be a market for a dumbed down car as well. And being in cybersecurity, I'm probably going to opt for that.
Tyler, to your point, the exact reason why I found the article was because of course, SiriusXM Pandora and our in-vehicle virtual assistant. I saw that Apple article and I went right to it. So that's a great point you brought up about, what capabilities they're going to have in these vehicles as well.
So we just thank you.
Lukashenko won't have to hijack planes anymore. He can just hijack an electric car.
But could he do it across borders? That would be the interesting move.
Why not? Why not?
Shaka Lingam, if I'm saying your name correctly. Great name, by the way. Welcome to the stage. Welcome to Tech News Around the World. Our friend Heyman wanted to invite you up because of your Bloom Energies, an energy storage company in the Bay Area. Any thoughts you have on the topic?
Yes. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on wherever you're listening this from. Yeah, this is Chokalingam, and if it's difficult for you to say Chokalingam, you can address me as Chok.
Okay,
that's fine as well. The overall on the electrification of vehicle, is that the topic? Just want to make sure.
we were talking about the feasibility of Apple doing a car, and there seem to be there seems to be indications that they certainly are, and then there's kind of feasibility questions as to when it could happen.
There is the possibility, Tyler, they're just doing middleware effectively, that they want to make the best user experience for. So you take, So one of the biggest differences between like a Tesla and most of the other electric cars I've seen and sat in is the instrumentation, the quality of the software, the screen. The other ones just seem to be in the olden days of it's just a bigger version of a normal car screen. It's just clunky and just not the same. Whereas a Tesla's slick. So maybe that's just it.
Chokalingam, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah. So certainly there's a lot of operational optimization in terms of the algorithm, right? There is a tight coupling of firmware and hardware interaction, and how you design the hardware so that when you're getting so much of data from the road, and be it automating the vehicle, and then I think Apple is well positioned in terms of understanding that interaction of the firmware, hardware, and then the software layer. That's my perspective.
Thank you for that. Yep, it's great having you up here on stage. Somebody wanted to share anything on stage in their their area of the world, geographically or professionally. If not, we have to.
I just wanted to
go ahead, Cam.
Tyler, going back to the discussion with semiconductor in China. I invested in a company that also one of the other investor was the former CEO of NXP, and NXP was supposed to merge with Qualcomm, and then China basically had a concern over that, and then merger fell apart. This goes back to 2016, so I think the semiconductor war started a few years ago, and I hope we come to a good agreement as far as considering what COVID has done to humanity, because competition is not going to be good for humanity. But I just wanted to drop that in, that back then even they clocked it.
Thank you, Cam.
By the way, the whole wars actually started in the 80s. We forget about that. The Japanese were ascendant in many other parts, and that's when Intel regeared themselves to concentrate basically on the Intel, the computing chipset, and they moved away from the whole DRAM market. So it's nothing new. In this case, it's not Japan, it's China now.
So there's a really concerning article I just retweeted out that U.S. soldiers expose nuclear weapon secrets via flashcard apps for U.S. soldiers tasked with the custody of nuclear weapons in Europe. The stakes are high. Security protocols are lengthy, detailed, and need to be known by heart. To simplify the process, some service members have been using publicly visible flashcard learning apps, like people use to learn alphabets in foreign languages, for example. or multiplication tables, if you remember third grade, inadvertently revealing a multitude of sensitive security protocols about U.S. nuclear weapons and the bases at which they are stored. While the presence of U.S. nuclear weapons in Europe has long been detailed by various leaked documents, photos, and statements by retired officials, their specific locations are officially still a secret, with governments neither confirming nor denying their presence. As many campaigners and parliamentarians in some European nations see it, this ambiguity has often hampered open and democratic debate about the rights and wrongs of hosting nuclear weapons. However, the flashcards studied by soldiers tasked with guarding these devices reveal not just the bases, but even identify the exact shelters with hot vaults that likely contain nuclear weapons. They also detail intricate security details and protocols, such as the positions of cameras, the frequency of patrols around the vaults, secret duress words that signal when a guard is being threatened, and the unique identifiers that a restricted area badge needs to have. Very concerning indeed, the idea that these flashcard apps that help people memorize things contain very important information. And they're not reporting that it's been hacked, just that the headline again is U.S. soldiers expose nuclear weapon secrets via flashcard apps.
So it's human idiocy.
Yes, indeed it is.
Yep, like what Tyler always say, Americans have the right to be dumb and stupid.
Yeah, my grandfather fought in Vietnam for your right to be an idiot. And
it's true.
We will leave it there. I just want to thank everybody for helping us out on an unscheduled, unrehearsed, obviously, as always, a version of Tech News Around the World. And it was, as always, a fun and wild ride. We will test tomorrow Tech News Around the World in Twitter Spaces. So follow our Twitter account to be part of that, but also follow it to keep updated on all the headlines that happen over the weekend, and to submit your own headlines that we can share on Monday when we come back here in Clubhouse. Click on the title of the room to see our schedule and our upcoming events. With most of the speakers on stage at this point are doing side rooms, including Dr. Danish and Amay and Justin and David do a fantastic room. Ben does a fantastic room. Heyman, it goes on and on and on. And they're all, these deep dive rooms are now becoming my favorite thing about Clubhouse, honestly.
Can I share something?
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Japan Standard Time, I have a room on cultural differences in flirting and love under the World Citizen. If you are free, just join us.
Most of us will be there, so you can follow most of us on stage, and you'll see us there tomorrow on the cultural differences of love. That's one of Cheryl's favorite topics, being that she dates people from everywhere. And
say that while her boyfriend's in the audience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's on the stage, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's gone.
He was here, yeah. But thank you, everybody. I just want to say thanks, and it was fun as always. And do follow the fantastic, brilliant folks on stage.
Brilliant. Thanks for doing this on a Saturday.
Yeah, it's fun.
Tyler.
We'll see you.
Nice surprise.
Yep.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Follow the club.
Thanks,
Push
everyone.
the little green button at the top.
Hi, thank you.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Ben.